April 19th, 2023. Can we have a roll call, please? Present.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Present.
Commissioner Chang-Rod? Present. Commissioner Slater-Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Donald?
Present.
For public comment, this is an opportunity for members of the public to engage in conversation with the commission on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any hands raised for public comment? I know that's what we're doing. We'll move along then to commissioner comments. Commissioner Chang-Corelli, I think you wanted to start off on this.
I do, because I want to recognize Commissioner Tom Mateusz's birthday today. Happy birthday, Tom. And these are for you on behalf of the Harbor District and Harbor Board, actually Harbor Board, which means you have to share it with all of them, right? So happy birthday, Tom Mateusz, on behalf of all of us.
Well, thank you very much.
And I got you your macaroons.
Glad to be able to take another trip around the sun. I look forward to next year at this time.
Thanks. So now you can share it. So just one quick thing. I attended Farm Day on March 31st, and it was a success. And I'm glad that the Harbor District was well represented. Was there. Mel, it was Mel. Who else was there?
I was there.
I know Catherine and Tom, but I thought someone else from staff, but maybe not. But we had good attendance, and I was glad. Someone asked me from the Half Moon Bay Review what the Harbor District had to do with Farm Day, and I said, well, our fishing fleet are the farmers of the sea. And so, you know, agriculture and fishing, they go hand in hand. So anyway.
I have a comment.
Yeah, so I'm done with my commissioner comment. Thank
No,
you.
I will tag on to that. And the traditional meal at Farm Day has always included a fish course.
Yeah.
Farming has always been recognized as an important part, not only of the coastside, but of the agricultural and food production industry here. Last week, I went to the California Boating Congress. It was the 7th annual event in Sacramento, and the purpose of the event is to introduce the legislators to marina owners, recreational boaters, fishermen, and harbors. It's amazing how little they know. And this is an important voting Congress. I hope that somebody from this district can attend every year in the future. We had discussions on that concern this district, this achieving 30 by 30 in California's coastal waters. And it's about, at the risk of sounding a little political, the bureaucratic efforts to cut off access for fishermen and commercial fishermen to the ocean under the guise of saving everything. It's terrifying. Another thing they talked about was the status of offshore wind development, which is not something that will affect us because we already have the bureaucratic invasion with the marine sanctuary and so on. But on the bottom of the coast and up at the top, Del Norte and so on, they're talking about 1,000-foot tall windmills.
I think Morro Bay too.
Morro Bay and down, I think, Ocean. Anyway, these are terrifying. They have been, they don't know what the effect on the ocean is. They don't know and they're going to be putting these areas off limits to recreational and commercial users. It's something we really need to be aware of. And not necessarily for us as a harbor district, but as individuals who care about our ocean and our ocean life. There was an interesting, fascinating discussion on abandoned vehicles, abandoned boats, and how you get rid of them, and the problems that has been going on for decades. And There was a discussion by Assemblymember Tasha Boehner Hovarth from District 77 down in San Diego area. And she has been doing a lot of work on sea level rise and the California economy. One of the things that she was talking about that I feel is of interest in this district is that as a sea level rise, it changes the groundwater dynamics, and it also causes rise of on the inside. And what's happening is the toxics that were put along shorelines, because swamps were an easy place to put barrels of oil and other things, that's now getting pushed up. And she has a workshop coming on that in the fall. So I'm in touch with her staff, and they're already aware of Oyster Point as problematic, and they're using Foster City as one of their cases in point. I don't know how many people are aware, but many of the houses in Foster City are built with kind of a concrete barge underneath them, and they kind of rock with the major tide changes. And if we're going to be, and South City might be very interested too in getting in touch with her about their shoreline, because they have a hugely impacted shoreline from all the urban stuff that's been going on in the Bay Area. It was well worthwhile, well put on, and it was interesting to meet so many special district people who really just care about their mission and their environment. So again, I thank Jim for sending us the note about it. I never would have been aware, and I'm glad I went.
Good. Thanks for the report. Commissioner Demera, do you wish to make any comments?
No, just thank Jim and staff for a tour of Oyster Point Marina that Catherine and I went on. We learned a lot about kind of what's going on there. So I appreciate the time and all the effort that the staff put in to show us around and what's happening there. So again, part of our educational process as we move forward is learn more about everything we got going. So again, thanks, Jim.
Commissioner Mateusz.
Tag teaming off of a little bit about Commissioner Slater Carter's comments. That 30 by 30 has often been looked at as a preservationism under the guise of conservation. It's been a problem. I do sit on a federal committee also regarding POEM and wind farms. On the East Coast, the wind farm that they've got is driving the whales closer to shore, and that's causing more ship strikes. So it's a problem, and we're looking at changing the call areas and evaluating the wind farms off California right now. Regarding Oyster Point, I went over to Oyster Point, first time in a long time. I was amazed at the construction progress. Again, things are looking a lot better, as you got to see right off the bat. One thing I was really impressed with, I went out on a boat, and the people were a little bit perked, but I just loved this thing when I heard, you go over to Oyster Point, they're gonna use a couple of Ziplocs that are serial numbered to seal your holding tanks so that there's no undue waste. I've been in harbors up and down the coast. You go to Avalon Harbor. Before you come into the harbor patrol meets you before you can get a slip or a mooring or anything, throws 2 tablets in your holding tank, make sure nothing's leaking. This is tremendous progress forward, and I totally support it, and I'm glad to see it within the San Mateo County Harbor District. I'd like to close out my comments by saying perhaps we could reorder our meetings or incorporate the pledge into the beginning of all of our Harbor District meetings. And I'd like that to be something that we think about carrying forward on our Pledge of Allegiance.
So we do it at the fire district.
I have an American flag I will donate.
We have one right there.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I
didn't look
had
far
to look
enough.
twice to find it myself.
Yeah, I didn't look far enough.
Okay, thanks for the comments. The only thing I want to mention too is that the last meeting I did ask us to try and get committee meetings to try and zero in on a mission statement for each of the committee due to a number of reasons that didn't really happen in each case. But I do want to kind of redouble the efforts to get committees to get together as soon as possible to identify a work schedule for this year in the mission statement. So,
Thank you for the reminder.
yeah. Okay. We can move on to activities report. Mr. Pruitt.
I don't have anything beyond the items. Improvement projects, we're still moving forward with the restroom project and green space at Surfers Beach. That's moving quickly now that the rain has slowed down a little. And same thing with the construction of the ADA restrooms at Pillar Point Harbor itself at Tenet Row. Those projects are moving forward. And hopefully the restroom will be complete within the next couple of months. So great work, mainly driven by Mr. Moran.
In the interest of time, I think what I'll do is I'll ask for the operations report and then the administrative and finance report, and then we'll open it to public comments on the three reports. So, John.
Afternoon, Commissioner. Jim, General Manager, already touched base on the projects. Everything's going very smoothly at both harbors. As Commissioner Mateusz already said, the Oyster Point construction there is really made a lot of progress. Development is almost complete as far as all the work that's to be done right now on the peninsula. There is later plans for a hotel to be built by City of South San Francisco, or one of their yet to be determined hotel vendor. Pillar Point Harbor and Oyster Point have, as you see in the activity report, some pictures of the hard work the staff led by at Pillar Point Harbor, Harbor Master Tibby and Assistant Harbor Master Dante Madrigal. And then at Oyster Point, led by James Smith, Harbor Master, and Assistant Harbor Master Jacob Walding. They've just done an excellent job, the whole team, in rebuilding docks that were damaged in these historic winds and rains. We had 80 knot winds, which is my 7 years here is unprecedented. They've just done an excellent job and continue to do so. Everything else is running quite smoothly. Nothing really of the eventful.
Julie.
Thank you, President Zemke. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The activity report gives a summary of the work that the administrative staff is doing, and they're doing a fantastic job with, all the normal work, and plus we're starting to get some of the projects done. Currently, a couple projects worth noting is that we're transitioning from our server files to SharePoint, which is fully integrated into our Office 365 email system. And in addition, we have signed an agreement with Tyler Technology, who is our enterprise resource planning system. And we are going to be early adopters of a full cloud system. They've asked us to join that team to make sure that all the bugs are worked out. And so we'll have some input into that product.
Very good.
I
Thank
think
you.
you're very brave to go in with the data group.
Yes, we have a great staff, so I have full confidence that we'll do good in that.
Do we have any hands raised for public comment on the activity reports? Okay, not seeing any public comment. Commissioner comments. Are there any commissioners who'd like to make comments or questions on the activity report? Okay, hearing none. We can go on to the consent calendar. I would like to pull item number 3 on this consent calendar. Are there any other items that we wish to pull off of the consent calendar?
motion to approve items 1 through 8, less item 3.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve items 1 through 8 with the exception of number 3 on the consent calendar. Can we have a roll call, please?
Did we do public comment on?
Public comment. Good question. Sorry for skipping ahead so quickly. Do I have any public comments? Okay, thank you. Roll call motion, please.
Commissioner Mathush?
Aye.
Commissioner Chang Raleigh? Aye. Commissioner Slater Carter? Yes. Commissioner Donald? Aye. President Zuski?
Aye. Okay, moving along to discussion items. Item number 9, Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center progress update. Mr. Moran.
This is an update on the Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center replacement project. The current restaurant and retail center building is decades old and has many challenges. It's in need of complete replacement, either at the same site, different site, or a full remodel for adaptive reuse. At direction of the board, staff publicly advertised a request for proposal, which included a requirement for extensive public outreach, during which input and ideas on which direction to go would be gathered. The Goring Estrada architectural team was chosen to lead the project. Their team is with us today to update the board and the public on their efforts thus far, to discuss the public input gathered, alternatives they have evaluated, and receive board direction on which to pursue. Now turn it over to Jim Goring, his team.
Thank you very much, and please let me know if the technology goes haywire. So we prepared a probably too long slide deck. I will probably speak too fast in order to address that issue. Very nice to see you this afternoon. So we have been working for a while trying to find appropriate design for the replacement and improvement of the existing retail building at Pillar Point Harbor. The first part of that study was to come up with a description of potential sites available on site and to meet with the public workshop and interviews and so on to gather feedback. And at that workshop and talking with other people, we shared kind of an evaluation of the existing building, explaining why this project was going forward. And that was kind of characterized by the existing facility has generous outdoor space, but it routinely reaches out excess capacity. Seating is located basically right on a parking lot. There's zero landscaping. It looks like a wide sidewalk because it is. And thank you for putting that there because it's a lot better than a narrow sidewalk. Large area of parking between the existing building and the water is fantastic. Vehicles drive within a few feet of people who are dining there. The building is sort of lost in the sea of parking. The facilities are aging. The systems are well past their functional lifetime and requires many upgrades. And repairing it in place would probably be more of an investment than would return value on it. And also the extraordinary views of the facility are not well taken advantage of. We talked at the public hearing about some of the environmental factors. I'm only going to present a couple here, which is basically sea level rise, more or less like every site in California, of course. You have earthquake issues. There are faults running near the site. Our geotechnical engineers have investigated and given us some feedback on potential sites. And as you know, we're smack on the water, so dealing with sea level rise is a very important part of this project. This chart is taken from what the California Coastal Commission takes as their bellwether hazard map. It's from Our Coast, Our Future. And this projects sea level rise out to 2100 with the 100-year surge shown as well. And you can see everything gets damp. And this sea level rise represents, with the storm surge, a rise of approximately 16 feet above mean low tide. It's worth keeping in mind that nearby development in the Princeton area has been approved as part of the local coastal plan with a slightly lower sea level rise threshold. You can see the area circled in red there. That's the Half Moon Bay Yacht Club. And the nearby commercial condominiums were also approved. They seem to have taken a strategy of mitigating potential damage during floods by building the bottom level to a sort of higher standard of construction. So if for 4 hours, once every 100 years, there's a 1.5 feet of water in there, the building won't be terribly damaged. We presented multiple site options to the, to begin a discussion with the community groups. And I'll just go through these here relatively quickly. Starting at the top, there was a notion of, and actually this was suggested at the meeting, we didn't present this, but it was suggested that we look at it. It's what we call a retreat option on the north side of Pillar Point Boulevard. We looked at an uphill option, or what we call the uphill option, which would be on the parking terrace directly above the existing retail building. We looked at the existing retail site, which has built-in advantages and disadvantages I will go over. We looked at an option of potentially right on the head wall, or what we call the head wall. I guess it's actually the bulkhead wall. We talked about an interesting idea, which would be a floating facility. Coastal Commission really hated that one. Then we talked about what we're calling now the Harbor Edge or Rocky Beach facility, potentially where the permit parking is now. In all of these schemes, of course, parking would be a net zero change. Wherever the existing building, if we're not building on the site of the existing building, that existing building would become parking. If we're building on the site of the existing building, obviously we don't lose parking. And then we looked at another site, which we called Weedy Beach, which is just almost high enough up above right where the cider house is currently. We also interviewed, how many people? 10 or 12, 8 people, members of the community that was suggested we get in touch with directly. We called them up. We had a list of written questions. We got a lot of feedback. And summarizing their concerns, our business tenants obviously are concerned over being over business continuity, potential loss of their business if the building is demolished. Where will they go in the meantime? That was a big concern. A lot of folks agree the existing building is tired and broken and invisible and sort of a mess. The harbor, some folks thought the harbor needs to draw more, be more visible, better signage, more family, kids activities, more outdoor activities. Excuse me if I just read some of these. I want to make sure not to forget any of them. There is not enough parking on site during peak season. And apparently some folks feel that parking regulation is not sufficiently enforced, and that might help address the system. Most of the feedbacks we got from folks is somehow, make it possible for the existing businesses to continue on site. 5 out of 8 folks thought sustainable, low carbon footprint practices are important. And our office certainly out of the gate, we want to make sure that we are as sustainable as possible. 6 out of 8 folks kind of mentioned the idea of an outdoor public gathering space as an important amenity that the site might provide. And then 6 out of 8 thought if there's some way to get actually on the water's edge somewhere, that would be a highly desirable amenity. We had a community workshop where we presented those site alternates and sort of a mood board that looked at a lot of other California coastal retail and hospitality restaurant facilities. We went over the issues I showed before, sea level rise and so on. And what we heard sort of from most of the people who were there was summarized in keep it simple, funky, local, hip, but not high end. Parking, again, was an issue, but not everyone is in favor of putting double-decker parking out there. And then we also, this is the online feed. We also had an online website where we were requesting folks' feedback, and people who left direct notes of the most, 21% as far as choosing existing sites. The highest group said fix the existing building or build on that site. 16% thought the Rocky Beach Harbor Edge site would be good. And then there was sort of between renovate the existing head wall or not Weedy Beach or not floating. And I take it back, actually 21% is repair the existing building, not necessarily add to it. The renovate existing building is 11%. And then the sort of lowest votes were sort of do nothing, build on Weedy Beach, build uphill, or let the tenants choose. So there was sort of a general kind of focus on look at the Rocky Beach edge or do something to the existing building. We had some on-site discussions with a few individuals. It was pointed out that the coastal trail is a really important aspect of the site. We should work with whatever scheme we do to enhance and preserve that. They're great views. Actually, your parking lot has the best views in your entire property. Unfortunately, it's on the wrong side of Pillar Point Boulevard, and it's highly valued as a parking lot. But there was a lot of discussion, well, maybe if we just dig into the hill here, this would be amazing. There's a lot of clutter on the landscape. It might be good funky. I was sort of thinking it might be not good funky, but it was pointed out to me was actually that's an awesome coastal use, so that could be kind of interesting. Again, the sea of parking in front of retail keeps coming up. There was a concern about blocking view to the eastern hills and Half Moon Bay. There was a concern to make sure we can still serve festival events that happen in the parking lot sometimes. It was pointed out that accessibility from the upper parking area to the lower parking area and the rest of the harbor facilities is not really terribly accessible or well signed. And visibility, presence, and branding of the marina is very lacking. People are trying to find it. You have to know exactly where you're going. So after we had these public workshops and public feedback, we kind of went back to the drawing board and looked much more focused at both the Princeton area and the Pescadero area, which came up as guideposts at the public hearing and were very useful to have. And you can see the yacht harbor on the upper left there, and other facilities nearby and distant that all seem to have the sort of a vibe that seem to correspond to what we heard at the public hearings. And even though that's a Southern California lifeguard stations, the Northern California ones are similar, but look a little bit more like a lunar lander. And again, there's some images here from Pescadero, from other buildings we think are great exemplars for coastal construction. And of course, that Half Moon Bay agricultural facility on the lower right, jetty wave, and so on. So after sharing this information with the commission or commission staff, we were directed to boil our efforts down to looking at two schemes. The Harbor Edge scheme, located at the parking area, and the retrofit site. So I'll first start with the Harbor Edge scheme, working with our landscape architects, Sasaki Walker Associates and April Phillips Design Group. They came up with a way of helping to fit the building onto the site in as naturalistic a way as possible. So the idea here is the building is separated into two pieces so that people in the parking area or in the west part of the site are invited to take a view to the landscape to the east. The building forward, southernmost building is seen as a restaurant facility. Probably it's set back approximately 80 feet from the head wall so that we can say that it's potentially not necessarily depending on that head wall. And also it turns out between those two buildings are approximately 20,000 gallons of diesel. So we can't build over that. But this would invite the coastal trail to actually become part of the development. It runs along the right-hand side of that. And then it comes up to the existing hard paving above the bulkhead wall. And that we sort of see as potential public asset, a public gathering space. So the building that fits there in one floor, and by the way, one floor was a very loud thing that came with some feedback from the public workshop. Either keep it small, or if you're building a new building, trying to keep it one floor. We're approximately 13,000 square feet, almost. The existing building is 7,700 square feet. Our sea level rise diagram for this site, since it's 100% new construction, we would set the floor level just barely above the 2,100 sea level height with the storm surge. The building in this area would be built on piles, so it could withstand a little bit of scariness depending on what happens with the bulkhead wall. So its floor level is set at 16 feet. Yeah. Then we saw it as sort of semi-industrial, semi-agricultural structures that kind of stagger along the front of the landscape with cascading landscape and usable decks surrounding it, ending on the south in an area that's basically what it is now, but accessible potentially to food trucks. There could be a public gathering place, much more active, much more landscaped, inviting public area. The part facing to the south is a little more subdued, less visible. We're seeing, it was mentioned by one of the folks we walked the site with, that it's possible we could invite the kayak business into this northernmost site and get a lot of that facility off the beach. Not all of it would be, of course, that's the launching location. It was an interesting idea. We also had hoped that a very small portion of the building, we might get a second floor deck to enjoy the amazing views out over the harbor into the ocean. So we really like this scheme a lot. The California Coastal Commission is less excited about it. It's very close to your existing bulkhead wall. It's very close to the old historic riprap along the Birch Beach area. Those would be difficult hills to climb with them. So the pros of this scheme are it's possible that the existing tenants can stay in business while this is built. That's a big pro. It provides new outdoor gathering space for community, and it's close to the water as an amenity and creates that public outdoor space right on the water's edge. Cons are the existing restrooms and shower need to be recreated somewhere, either within this building, or we were thinking at least most of them could be moved to where the new bathrooms are currently being built as an addition to that facility. Coastal Commission will be a very uphill battle on this or a series of awkward discussions. The fuel tanks will pose difficulties. It turns out you can build up to 5 feet from them, so they may not be a deal killer, but they're difficult to work with. And from the parking lot, the building interferes with views to the east, the hills, and Half Moon Bay itself. So then we looked at the scheme we kind of went through the gate with, which was to put a second floor on the existing building. And our thinking of this is that the existing building, the concrete foundations and the concrete masonry, shear walls and structural walls might be reusable, which is a huge benefit in terms of reducing the amount of clutter gone into the waste stream. Forgive me, I'm talking too long here. So accelerate my pace a little bit. And also when we originally thought of this thing, we thought the second floor could be accessed only from the upper deck. We wouldn't have to have an elevator. There'd be no stairs connecting them. As we proceeded, we kind of realized, actually, there should be an elevator and stairs connecting the two. But the idea here is that the second floor would be 2 probably restaurant spaces, restaurant or other kind of hospitality spaces with a very large, generous elevated deck between them. That deck would be accessed from the upper parking terrace and serve both of those restaurants. And then you can see on the bottom edge there's a stair that goes down to the east and another stair that will go down and wrap around to the west. This building is approximately 12,500 square feet. The new space, obviously, upstairs. So that's approximately 5,000 square feet of added space. And this shows, well, we'll see in the views. The building is a mix of some areas higher than the existing building, whereas we're reducing area in the middle of the building. So one of the blessings and curses of the existing tenant row is it's more or less invisible. So we think this is still a sort of modest compromise. The roof is relatively flat to be as low as possible in profile. The patio area is much lower than the existing building. And we're thinking of very slightly sloped roofs, mainly to get the water off, but otherwise keep it sort of humble out of the gate. Sea level strategy on this one is one of the reasons we showed the slide that referenced the yacht club and the adjacent commercial condos, both of which have their floor levels approximately the exact height of this existing retail building. So we would imagine as this building is developed, the lower 2 feet of the walls would have basically concrete or concrete masonry socks. So in the worst case, 4 hours every 100 years, when the water might come up there, it wouldn't be insurmountable damage to the building. In trying to keep it small, local, funky, we were sort of looking at nearby exemplars. So the palette of materials here is vertical corrugated metal, vertical wood, and corten steel as a sort of accent part. So this shows a view, sort of bird's eye view of the stair opening down to the east, going across that deck. Landscape improvements, I think, would make a big difference in that wide sidewalk area, make it a lot more inviting. As you approach the building from the access from, is it Cabrillo? Capistrano, thank you. We'd kind of invite whatever tenants are there to be somewhat bold with their branding and also sort of discourage, large plastic signs, things like that on the north side of the building. We're imagining actually, as you see in sometimes industrial buildings, painted graphics on the building. Really tearing off a little siding if you get a new tenant, putting new siding on is probably not any more costly than a sign itself. But again, humble materials, kind of playfully employed. And you can see here the stair going down to the north part of the building that might be a valet drop off if it's one kind of tenant, or might simply be a second access that allows you to go through the building. This is a lower view from that same corner as before, showing the bottom level as open as possible and the retail tenants, the upper level, a lot of glass, but the windows cut into small pieces. So they're not trying to avoid slick wherever we can. Avoid slick. That was sort of what came up at the community meeting. Small, local, and funky, better than slick, modern, and too shiny. Although honestly, I think we've sort of threaded the needle rather nicely. The deck area, I'm not sure if you can see, the landscape architects had a fantastic idea, which there might be a tasting bar. If there's some restaurant on the left might have an outdoor eating area with a bar around it. There's a generous amount of seating area here. So even though both spaces are relatively small by some restaurant considerations, they can take advantage of this very large outdoor area when weather permits, of course. And that's a view from one space looking out across the garden or the deck area at the other. And that's a view as you might approach it from the north. So the pros of this one is the building footprint doesn't change. We build on the existing structure that will very likely spend, it's not written here, but that will vastly reduce site development costs. So it's going to save money there. Provides new outdoor dining and viewing deck, which takes the sting out of having 150 feet of parking between you and the water's edge. Excuse me, the building has some presence. We've raised it up a little bit, but not much. And minimal impact on parking. We're trying to actually stay parking neutral. Low CO2 construction because we're trying to use as much of the existing concrete as we can. Concrete is the biggest enemy in terms of CO2. Cons are the difficult struggle of maintaining business continuity. Needs special construction for the floor level that is a little lower than 2100 worst case scenario. And there's still a parking lot between this building and the building's edge. However, in preliminary discussions with the Coastal Commission, they said, yeah, we prefer this one. It's more sustainable, and we have to make fewer compromises about sea level rise. So next step, we're looking for input from the commissioners is to choose one of these schemes to allow us to move forward on. We'd incorporate any feedback we receive here. And then our next steps are to launch our technical consultants to finish the schematic design, get a cost estimate, and begin the entitlement process. Thank you for your time.
What I'm going to do is open it to public comment first. Are there any, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this? Yes.
You turn in a public comment card.
Do we have public comment cards? Or
He will fill one out.
Yeah, you don't have,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you can fill one out.
Fill one out later.
Honorable Chair, Commissioners, staff, I want to thank you for the presentation. I'm Mark Massara. I'm an attorney. I do coastal land use and permitting, primarily with the Coastal Commission over the last 30 years, and lived just down the way in Miramar. My thought was that I was going to request that you consider a hybrid. I know that they didn't go into a lot of discussion about the uphill site behind the existing facility, but I liked both the rehab proposal for the existing facility and the uphill site, primarily because you get more space and it allows you to grow over time, and you don't have to go back repeatedly for these lengthy entitlement discussions and meeting with the Coastal Commission. It also gives you the opportunity to leave the existing businesses in place while you first build the uphill site, and then you come back and build the lower site with the 2 stories. And so I would appreciate a little more consideration of that hybrid. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question? You mentioned the site, you mean the site immediately above the existing tenants?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We need the cards, the public comment cards. Do we have?
It's only so we spell your name right.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Who's this?
Carlisle and Young.
Oh, hi, Sid.
Oh, hi. That wasn't my voice, so I don't know who said my name. Hi, I just wanted to mention to the person that was giving the presentation. I'm sorry I turned in a little late, but I really like the repurposing the existing building because it's a lot more sustainable by, like you said, not throwing stuff in the landfill, but and using the existing foundation. Of course, it's sad that businesses might be upset in the process, but I really like the upstairs deck for people who want to just hang out and have a drink and watch the view. But one thing I have to say, please, it would maybe just a drawing on your plans, but please lose the tree. Trees have tipped over during these terrible storms we've had all up and down the coast side. And if you have a 2-story tree right next to that deck or your building, you're just asking for trouble. So please, I hope that was just something to frou-frou up your your drawings, and you're not really planning any kind of a tall tree there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is that it for public comments?
Yes.
Okay. I will open it to commissioner comments. So there are commissioners who would like to make. Virginia.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for these drawings. So I'm actually looking at the feedback from individual interviews. I don't have a page number, but it's that section. It has 5 out of 8 and 6 out of 8. So the first bullet, 5 out of 8, desire additional public serving businesses. Did anyone indicate what kind of public serving businesses they prefer, like restaurants or shops? I mean, was that even drilled down to that level? Or, I mean, sometimes people might just offer that, right? I don't know if you've heard any of that kind of feedback.
The thing I remember is a couple of people we spoke to, and you're talking about the one from the individual interviews. We're looking at larger California coastside restaurants that have a big draw would be an interesting use. I'm not sure those community center uses also mentioned.
Community center was mentioned. Like more varieties than what existing right now. They can say
The retail shops, you mean? Not, okay. Yeah, I mean, this looks like it could give us more diversification in terms of the businesses that might go in there. So the other thing is, are these, I guess it looks like these buildings that are more boxy, and I get it, I get the space issue.
Are you on the
Just in general.
post-workshop revised reference pages 1?
No, just the schematics, the pictures. So, I mean, if you look at some of the Pescadero and the buildings there, they're I don't know, got that old world charm, right? Or that seaside charm, at least like Oceana Hotel, even though it's newer. And I mean, so I don't know. I mean, this is just my personal preference. I'm not a big fan of the boxy buildings, but that's just me. I get it. That may be the trend, but we're looking at beyond like today. And I get it that maybe, that kind of architecture might provide better lighting or views, but is there any other choice besides these choices in terms of the building look?
There are an infinite number of choices.
Okay, but these are the ones that are presented to us.
Yeah, we actually, we went in 2 different directions so that actually to help you have this discussion. One of the sort of the beachside scheme is a sort of flag and rip off of some kind of coastal construction that's both industrial as well as if you go up the North Coast to Sea Ranch, you'll see those kind of shapes a lot. So it's a little bit funky, but it's also very modern. The existing building site, we had a lot of constraints that we couldn't fight too much. We wanted a flat roof to keep things low. We wanted a lot of glass to let people see the amazing views. We tried cutting the scale of the glazing up to be a little bit more on the funky side. So I think the 2 schemes, that existing building site probably leans closer to the model images we have from both Pescadero and Princeton. It is bigger. I mean, it's at 12,500 square feet. It's a small development, but it's much bigger than the little salt box retail
Right,
on
in
Pescadero.
Pescadero,
the
right.
Sheds. But, people mentioned those shed developments. We went and looked at them and realized they're each about 110 square feet. It's a very different scale of project.
I know, this just looks like a big box to me.
Gorgeous box.
I don't know.
No,
I'm sorry. I mean, that's just my opinion. I get it, like the little shed, even like the old Princeton Landing has that saloon look, even though it's rectangular. Yeah, that wasn't in here. So anyway, I mean, I guess there are different ways, but I don't know. I just think that.
We did have that discussion, if I might interject, that, just because it seems that the majority of the people that did attend our meeting wanted the kind of funky,
Well, you can
plain
have that.
look.
But they're not necessarily boxy look.
Yeah, I was getting at it, just that, just because that was kind of what we gathered from the meeting, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of San Mateo County was represented. That there may be a lot of people that want a more detail than just a
Modern.
metal rectangular shed, if you will.
I should point out also, main thing we're looking for is to choose one side or the other. We aren't finished with the design, so we'd be happy for your input
Okay.
moving forward.
That's what I gathered from the action items, like the actual site versus the building. Okay, architecture.
Once we determine what direction we want the Goring Strategy team to go in, then they can come back again with, that is the plan, for them to come back again with alternatives at that site.
You mean building design?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Slater-Carter.
thank you. I prefer the uphill site and the existing building. People are used to that view blockage. And one of the things I know Coastal is concerned about is view blockage. If I were a developer and having a restaurant, I would be lobbying for Rocky Beach because people would have to come sit on my patio and buy a drink to get a view there. But I don't think Coastal would agree with that. I like the idea of original site and the uphill site together because I think we should be planning for the long-term future compact development and expansion of harbor services. I like it because it is central to both the existing semi-functional shopping center, hotel, and access point from the stoplight and from parking along the highway and so on. I'd like to see more access developed to the harbor. I agree about the trees. Hello, we're on the coast. Trees don't survive here. Palm trees do, but that's a small down the road statement, piece of design. Those work condos that you referred to, I was on the original design review county for the community when those went in. We were appalled. We did everything we could to stop them. The county refused. Those were seen by the county as absolutely wonderful new design architecture. Those of us who are involved in the community and the people we talked to went, oh my God. Hasn't gotten any better if you drive down that road. So in terms of the location, I like it. I think we have to be thinking very long-term in terms of being able to expand it. I see with so many things happening in San Mateo County and in the agenda, this Harbor District site in particular is going to become a more and more crowded and desirable space for people in the county to come. We just did half the advertising that Sam's Chowder House does. We wouldn't have enough parking. We don't get ourselves out there to advertise, and it's fine. But at some point, people will get to know it. And I really hope we're looking at long-term vision. You know, you, George, know how many people use the Pacifica Pier for fishing. It's
It's a place to park in the summer, or during crab season also in the winter.
Exactly. It's an important asset. And people come to this district from all over the state. I've done a lot of talking to folks when I was walking my dog out on the Mavericks Trail, and I was shocked and amazed at how many people came from Roseville, Nicola, or Reading. And so I think parking is an important thing that we need to deal with. I would be happy as a board member to help deal with coastal. I worked with coastal staff for a lot of years on different coastside projects. I know others who we could get to do that. I think this is, and I want to have this seen as part of an existing treatment of the entire site that the harbor owns, and maybe future sites that we might be adding to our inventory. This harbor district is really important, and I want to see us working for 100 years or more while we can. And all of these people who say, oh, mass transit, forget it. People are not going to use a gondola. They can't use a gondola to get here. You know, we'd have to have a car for every gondola customer so that they could Uber around. That's nuts. So parking is important. And I think we should be looking, not necessarily for this project, but in the overall concept of double-decker parking. Because I believe we will have that many people here. I mean, if you come to the beaches, you guys do, on a hot Saturday, it looks like Coney Island. There's so many people on the beaches. And we are the place where they want to come and eat and catch snacks and that kind of thing. So, like I say, I like the site. Let's work on it, but we got to work some on. I'm considering what you presented as potential designs as just placeholders to get our minds working on what we'd like to see. And I'm thinking I will go up and down, take my own time and money and drive up and down the Oregon coast and the California coast and see what's out there. My preference is, instead of a unified kind of building, is to have it look like buildings that are like in Cannery Row in Monterey, where they're different buildings.
That's funky too.
And it gives each building and each tenant an identity that's separate. And people remember, oh, I'm going to, because some of us don't read well, I'm going to the Blue Fish Place. And it's right next to the Red Beer shop.
That's a good example. The town of Monterey, the town of Mendocino is another example of that whole perspective of the whole coastal community of whatever.
That funky vibe.
If you look at the design review standards for the coast side, I worked on those and with some brilliant people. And we were all looking at more the arts and crafts, mid-century modern kinds of design concepts, compact with articulation and differentiation. One of the points of pride on this entire coast side, not necessarily Half Moon Bay, because there's housing tracts down there, but people here and people in many parts of the rest of the county enjoy that each house is different. And I think we could get that kind of concept worked into this structure. And I'll probably have a lot more to say later, but I will. I see George's hand is up, and I won't bore you.
Commissioner Dummer.
I guess I have a little bit of a concern about, now, many of us, if not all of us, have been there. We've been at Catch Joanne's, we've eaten there, we've sat outside and had to eat there, and there is nothing worse than all of those cars going back and forth with little kids. But the worst part is the carbon footprint and the carbon emissions when you're sitting there trying to enjoy a meal. So I guess one question is, did we measure what those cars put out now in an existing kind of benchmark? And the other thing is that predominant winds during the spring and summer and early fall is from the northwesterly direction. So either the existing building or the uphill one, the wind is going to be blowing everything from that parking lot into both of the old structure or the newer uphill one. So whenever you have that parking in front of that building and the wind's going to be pushing, even sitting on the second floor would improve your visibility over some of the cars for the visuals. You kind of look over it, you're still going to get, that emission. Now, in 30 to 50 years, when everybody has an electric car, I guess maybe it's not a problem, but that's not going to happen for a while. So I guess I have a little bit of concern about, about that kind of health aspect of what people will be exposed to with a parking lot kind of in front of either one of those. So it's something to think about.
Commissioner Matoush, you have some comments.
I was going to start out by saying one thing that on the statistics, 5 of 8 was such a small pool, but Director of Operations Moran countered that isn't in the entire county. So that's a plus there. That's a pretty small pool to look at for information. One thing with the existing lot and rebuilding that, you're still over a parking lot. And the old building and you're still looking at the old Harbor Master building. One thing that I haven't heard is that's an old, antiquated, out of, past its lifespan building that must be torn down, destroyed, repurposed. We can put some, it's not that we can't have an office there, but let's have some type of a retail office, restaurant type thing. 2 stories is needed for a variety. Again, get rid of the Harbor Master building. Individual businesses, I disagree with the Harbor District doing the advertising. Individual lessees should be doing the advertising. I like Mr. Massara's comment about the split development. For instance, to retrofit the existing, and trust me, as long as I've been a commissioner and before that, I'd like to see that building torn down for how inefficient it is, and the numerous problems with drainage, gas, water, fog, the heating, burning wood on no burn days. So there's a whole lot of problems with that whole building. And talking about how many people come here, think about, we take for granted our temperatures here, but so many people come here just because it's 30 degrees cooler here than it is 20 miles to the east. So I'd like to see the old restroom too, repurposed, whether we turn that into a combination of retail. So it's like, I guess that's part of the Harbor's Edge. But the old restroom has to be redone entirely, refit. So, it's retrofit Harbor's Edge and existing. I don't know, what can we do? We have so many plans that have been drawn up for this area over the past 4 decades that there's packages somewhere in one of our little warehouses where you can see buildings that are designed and all this before. How many of these can you leverage off of and see how that fits in the current plan? But I'd certainly like to see, when I use the term modernization, or just a rebuilding of what we have. I'm hesitant about the current building, but if you're saying that we could build over the top of that, those horrible cinder blocks and whatnot, well, okay, give it a try. But let's spread out the access so that people can be in this part of the harbor, they can be in that part of the harbor, They can visit something else, and then if they want, they can walk between all 2 or 3. That the utilization of our land space, I'm really happy to hear that we're not going to necessarily lose parking. I think that there's things that we can do. I think it will take people like Mr. Massar and Commissioner Slater Carter working with the Coastal Commission, because we're going to have to do a full court press on some sales here. But we're trying to build something for generations ahead of us, not just of what exists now, here and now at this point. So those are my tentative thoughts thus far.
Thank you. My comments and concerns, I guess my first reaction, I kind of like the harbor side, harbor view one, the Rocky Beach.
The harbor's edge.
Harbor's Edge, yeah, whatever we call it. For a couple of reasons. It's has a nice vibe to it. It's close to, it's great views. I do understand that there's some uphill concerns on that. And I definitely don't want to get into a long drawn out battle with the Coastal Commission over what they think is the best for us. But that being said, the other concern too, if we go with a hybrid approach, this would eliminate the upper parking lot, I assume. So that's a net loss of parking. If you put in the hybrid, the uphill, you build the uphill one first and then renovate the existing site. But that has potentially, I think, a lot of potential, particularly if you can come up with a second floor on the existing building that gets you at least a view shed that's a bit above the parking lot, and have the first floor more of a retail rather than restaurants where people are just walking. It doesn't feel that much, that it's not like eating your lunch next to a bus stop, you know. So you would at least have that visual advantage of having the second floor. So I guess I'm leaning towards that, exploring that hybrid option with maybe a second,
Another alternative.
another alternative. Maybe it's a different alternative, but looking at that, that might make some sense. And I guess I assume that our goal here today is to kind of come up with at least a consensus among the board of which direction to pursue here.
We were hoping we were at a point where we considered all the different sites and considered the pros and cons of each one. My preferred choice is the one on the waterfront where the existing bathroom structure is. And that's a lot of people's first choice, but the Coastal Commission flat out pretty much said no. Because we have to build it as if the bulkhead's not there.
Right.
So take away the bulkhead, because we can't use that as a mitigating factor for sea level rise. If that bulkhead's not there, how can you build a building there? And then they also, over on the east side of it, on the Rocky Beach area, they really were negative on that. And trying to fight the Coastal Commission on something that they pretty clearly said, forget it.
They're not going to approve it, it sounds like.
To me, is with limited financing that we have, moved option B. And option B for me and for many was building on the existing site, because it does have a lot of the pros that we're looking for. The cons of the existing businesses will have to be shut down while we build the building. But they'll have, and we've told them that they have right of first refusal coming back to the new building if they wanted to. And our hope is that they'll help in the design of the building as we build it, and they can capitalize on the new construction by moving equipment in or others during the actual construction process. Building up on the upper parking lot is another great idea, parking lot B, which is right behind the existing structure. However, the view shed, because we're getting real close to the corner of Pillar Point Boulevard and Capistrano, the view shed will be very difficult to overcome by building on that, and it will never get a two-story. With that said, the existing building provides a first story that's below the upper parking lot. And it also provides a second story that we can put those, again, deck area where people can sit and enjoy the sunshine or watch the boats. And then also indoor restaurants where they'll be able to enjoy a meal if that's what they want to do in either one of those. There is another idea, and it's really, we haven't discussed it at all with anybody, but extending the building, the second deck, you know, we can extend it over into the upper parking lot and make the existing building larger and get a larger restaurant up there. That's another option that they haven't looked at yet, but people have brought to me and said, why don't you extend the upper level into that parking lot? And we'd be able to do that at one story. We'd have to build into the, you know, level out that parking lot a little lower, but that's, I think, is a lot more viable than building a brand new building up there. And it would be very small compared to rebuilding the existing building with an extended deck area or restaurant areas up into the upper parking lot. We'll lose that parking scheme. I am working on a new parking areas for the harbor right now. I haven't got it ready for the board to consider, so I don't want to bring it up and what we're doing until I have everything lined up and prepared. But we are running out of parking and we need to do something about that. We are out of parking right now with opening days and high fish days, or when the tuna comes in close. You'll notice trucks, trailers out there on Highway 1. That parking, we need to find that parking here to get the trucks and trailers off of Highway 1 and provide that safety corridor for driving and provide parking for our customers on the Harbor District property. So that's in the future, the additional parking, but it is in the thoughts of staff right now. But that's kind of our thinking on why we Perch Beach, fantastic, but it's a smaller building. And the Coastal Commission, they call it Rocky Beach in theirs. The Coastal Commission is rarely not going to go approve that in any way. Plus the building's small and you only have access to one side. It'll be a beautiful over the water restaurant, but it's very limited and safe. Same thing with the, we do leave the harbor master in place, and there's enough room on the other side of the harbor master between the harbor master's office and the hoist to put a building in there. But we run into the same problem that the building's being built on the breakwater. And if we build a new building, we can't build it there with the breakwater. We have to pretend it's not there, which is ridiculous, but that's what we have to do. So that building, really, we can't do much about that. The floating building's a great idea, but it takes away slips and it'd be smaller. And what we're trying to do with this building, our staff's hope is that we get a newer building that meets all the requirements for environmental, and then correct some of the storm drain issues that we have, but also more square footage of retail space that we can bring in a varied retail space because there's more of them. And we can bring in different restaurants or other things that will increase the operating profit from the commercial enterprises under the enterprise district. So that's taking all those into consideration. And really the only two that came down were next to where the existing bathrooms are, which Coastal Commission won't approve, or existing site, which really limited us to one, and that's the existing site. And we're kind of coming to the board saying, do you agree with that? And if you are, then we'll start the next phase of, and it sounds like we need a workshop on what the building will look like.
Right.
But we can also include exploring the option of extending the second deck up into the upper parking lot. So I'm not going to call anybody, but
I'd like to say,
hopefully that answered questions.
Quick comment.
no, Mike, I get the quick comment.
Mr. President.
Make your quick comment.
So do you think that the hybrid design that was kind of thrown out there by Mr. Massara is an alternative that we should look at
I have to,
or come up with. I mean, it could be another alternative. I mean, what's your timeline for this? It doesn't, I know that we are on a timeline, but it's, if we push it out another few months, is that going to make or break anything that we do?
it just stalls, we're just pushing it through. And the hybrid idea can be, I don't know how well it will work. I'd have to think about it.
And I don't know. I mean, it just came out of this public meeting.
And the hybrid, my understanding is the hybrid alternative would be maybe rebuilding the existing site as one story and building a second site up further north, up in the top upper parking lot B. And your thoughts with regard to that, Jim Goring?
Just real.
Hybrid, you go.
What I was describing was hybrid.
Have more than one option right now, especially if the coastal commission is probably gonna balk at the harbor's edge option, right? It gives them, we're only down to one instead of a possible two.
What I meant to suggest was that these buildings would eventually be connected. So similar to what your executive director is suggesting, but not that it be one story. The first one is two, the second one is one, but it's higher up. So they can be connected and you just end up with.
Right. That's kind of what I was describing.
So you're talking about the Rocky Beach area. I get what coastal's after, but I also think there's like real opportunities to make dramatic improvements and make usable space, whether it's public gathering space or event space, with sort of resilient planning, right? So you don't have vulnerable structures in those areas, but you could still make great use of them.
So my question would be kind of a follow-up to that. What would it take from the Coastal Commission side to mitigate for any of these? So let's say we did want Harbor Edge that we're now saying they're totally refusing. But if we were to push that, what would they want in mitigation?
Well,
To do
actually,
that?
we can't even discuss that. You can't interact with the public.
I just, it's a general.
Right, just throw it out there. So,
Yeah,
but
it's
the
just a
point
general
is that if these are unanswered questions, it probably warrants another meeting to take into consideration a possible different option as well. That's all I'm saying.
Because, yeah, they may challenge some.
Something, right. But I mean, that can all be put out in the workshop, but what I'm saying is, if worst case scenario, then we only have one option, and that's not acceptable to me, right? So these questions could be done in a different meeting. So anyway, I didn't want I hope, Mark, you understand, we cannot interact with the public. So I'm taking this discussion to the board.
I just wanted to say, I like the hybrid concept because it gives us time to get, it gives us more flexibility. But one of the things, and it may be a place using the side, beach side area, is to put in a picnic area, seating, maybe somewhat protected, so you can have food trucks come in. Food trucks are a big deal, and I see them everywhere now. People love food trucks. Shoot, there's a food truck routinely out in the parking lot at the hotel, because they've got a restaurant site inside the mall and nobody comes to it. So they just put their business out in a food truck. And people are drifting in and out of to and from that food truck all day. I like the idea of being able to accommodate different uses at different times. And if we got rid of those bathrooms, those Soviet era bathrooms, you could have a great picnic area or a little additional parking for some things, and then for other times you'd have food trucks and people could bring their picnics and just come and enjoy it. And to taking a couple months extra, what if we just took an intense next month, like Virginia and me, to look at the stuff, toss it around. And since you guys are also reasonable and Virginia and I are so opinionated,
We have our thoughts.
we could, and we could take Jim's knowledge and John's knowledge, which is far more important
And
than
these
opinions,
designs.
is actually work. And sort of sketch this out with you guys. It sounds like this hybrid idea is something that would be, that we could, would accommodate the needs of most of the people. So I'll be quiet.
Does that sound like an ad hoc committee for
Yes.
a month to meet with
Well,
John and
for
the
however long
contractor?
we need it.
Huh?
For however long we need it. And
Well, an ad hoc committee by definition is kind of
Right.
short term, so yeah.
Right, but it could be till the end of this year.
The end
Or
of
shorter.
I see.
Yeah.
Mr. Pruitt has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm gonna be quiet.
I'd like to just reemphasize repurposing the restroom at the end of Johnson Pier. And also the harbor master's office. There's a vast expanse there. The building is past its useful life. How can we repurpose the harbor master's office and get perhaps some retail use out of that? You've got a 2-story building there now. I don't know what it would take coastal commission wise to expand that 2-story. I know that we can't use the 2 stories as much as we'd like to. However, prime real estate, just like to see something done with the harbor master's office and the restroom while we're talking about all this.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but what you're describing would require us to treat it as a new building
Yes.
and meet with the coastal commission requirements. And they've already said, no, we're not going to approve anything on the bulkhead.
Okay.
So we can't really
That's,
touch either one of those buildings or change them substantially.
that's why.
And really, I have a question for the board, and is we're trying to figure out right now is the location of where this building should be,
The site.
not the exact design.
The site.
So if the board agrees that this is the proper site, the actual design of the building, what it looks like, if it goes up to the upper parking lot or not, that's a separate question. So today's question is, one, do we move forward with the current site? Now, discussions with the Coastal Commission have been positive, are more positive with rebuilding the existing building than any of them, and flat out rejection of some of them. But when we going back to the existing building, we can work with you on that. Great. So that's the question we're asking today is not what will the building look like? This is one example. The question is today is, does the board agree with us in the location in which staff is recommending?
Well, you're recommending the Harbor's Edge. Well, what are you? I mean,
Jim, I have a question. Do you need a motion? Would you prefer a motion or a consensus?
we should have a motion.
It's information, so consensus,
You have a comment.
is that the right place to build?
Okay, and what's your comment?
Just someone asked me my opinion, but actually I have a few comments that you might find useful in your discussions. One is, as much as we do like the design of the building, even as we're designing it, and you should keep in mind, the nature of retail construction is as tenants come in, they will want to modify their space and make it their own space. So that's real important to keep in mind. The other thing, I'm sharing this image just for one reason, which is the idea of a hybrid screen. Of course, we're excited about doing a larger design, and it could be on the upper terrace, or frankly, it could be the upper building there, which is far enough away from the bulkhead wall to not be impacted by sea level rise. So there are potentially other flavors of a hybrid scheme. I think, Jim, we have underway yet another consultant who's basically trying to develop a marketing package, not necessarily a marketing package, but a market analysis to find out what size spaces, what tenants, what potential incomes. And that's maybe we can have 2 weeks out for the first draft of it, I think. So that is all coming together basically, which will help add reality or not to the hybrid scheme, because the hybrid scheme is a bigger building. Your existing is 7,700 square foot. We're showing about 60% larger. Hybrid scheme will probably be at least 50% again, which I think, you could probably make use of. But anyway, all that stuff's coming together.
Jim, sorry, George.
Well, I was going to say, Jim kind of read my mind, because as we're talking about hybrid solutions and maybe other hybrid locations, one of them is that if the Coastal Commission is more upset about that restaurant or the second lower building closer to the brick wall in that section, then maybe the upper area is still developable. And yet, and the Coastal Commission may not have as much trouble with that. In addition to that, it may be you go to the existing site also. So maybe we got to look at it. Not just one hybrid of lower and upper in that one section, but lower and across. And then you can get rid of that bathroom. You can make that maybe more of a picnic tables, or that's where the coastal trail, we can have join into right into that portion of the structure. So
I would suggest with this extra, maybe 18,000, up to 18,000 square feet that we're talking about, that we should design in at the higher levels and at public access levels. So I'm thinking of parking lot B, the Harbor Commission offices, because I love the fact that you guys have put in a public access office where people can come in and you're taking phone calls and people walk in and they want to know information and stuff in the existing harbor building. And I think that's an important part of the long-term image of a publicly accessible harbor district. And so we could take some of that other square footage, and I have to admit, I don't mind tearing down that building. It's been plug ugly for years. It was a Soviet style art piece. And I think that it's probably about a dozen parking spaces.
So Jim, keep interrupting.
Sorry. Commissioner Ratush, you wanted to make a comment.
Well, I think from what I'm gathering from the general manager and others, for the way to proceed forward, I think we're going to have to just say, as an agreement, let's rebuild the existing structure that I don't want to rebuild, but I would go with that because it seems like the way to move this whole project forward. And I'd be in support of that. And we can work out the parking, we can work out auxiliary buildings or whatever. But like it or not, I'll take the bad pill of rebuilding the existing center. And I hope my fellow commissioners, so we can move this project along, can go down that road.
Okay, I think Virginia had a final comment.
Well, I actually may have missed it, but Jim, what is the recommendation of because I may have missed it in the report because this was just informational and to accept.
Yeah, it's informational, but
do you prefer Harbor's Edge? Is that what it sounds like?
The drive of the presentation was, or the ending premise was that we did consider all of those spots. We did get public input at a workshop and also with specific local leaders or organizers and walked around and worked. We already put feelers out for each space with the Coastal Commission. And after all of that, and the reality of getting built was rebuild the existing site. We didn't talk about the upper building as a separate entity with the Coastal Commission. We can, but also with the amount of the budget that we have to build, we have to consider that with the new building, we'll bring in a significant amount of more money in lease payments that maybe we can go to phase 2 of that and build the other building that you're discussing at the upper beach and then go back and, that's my intent was, or my hope was this new building will bring in the revenue that will allow us to do what we want to do with the master plan and moving forward. what you're discussing now about tearing down the harbor master office, all that's new and not in the master plan.
Right, right. So
We'd have to revisit the master plan I think if we want to go in that direction, which
I don't even know.
we can do with that. But right now, the question is, after all the sites that we looked at, the only one that's going to be able to get through all the permitting is rebuilding the existing building.
Right, it's definitely easier, right? Definitely it's easier to go through that permitting process.
Yes, it's.
For sure.
Well, I wouldn't say it's easier, I would say it's possible. While the other ones are not.
It's easier than the Harbor Edge one, which seems like we won't even get past coastal, right? And so.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying this one's possible where the other ones.
Almost impossible. But so we picked this site, then how would a hybrid design work?
That's not for us to decide right now.
I understand that, but I'm looking ahead. And so I don't want to lock off our options.
I think the hybrid site could be looked at with approving this site.
The existing site, yeah.
So we can say.
That's how I'm reading it.
You can direct us, the board can direct and say, you develop the existing site, but integrate the possibility of the hybrid model or the integrating, in other words, utilizing parking B as part of the structure.
So moved.
If that's what the board.
No, so I agree with that. I'll second that.
Thank you.
I will say, because I
Jim, if
agree.
he's nodding, you're not. He's losing more hair, I think.
So let me just make sure I'm going to make sure we're actually looking at the right property. It's the retrofit site, correct?
Yeah, if Jim could throw a screen back up on the.
That's actually in the public documents. And I want to make sure that we're voting on the retrofit site.
Not going to vote. We're going to just have a consensus.
Yeah, it's just consensus. It's not.
Well, then I withdraw my motion.
Okay, that's fine. A consensus, because she made a motion, that's fine. Okay.
So then that doesn't throw out Harbor Edge Upper. I mean, that other building
The
as part of a
hybrid
master
piece.
plan that we can do in the future.
Right.
Right, so it gives us flexibility, right,
Well, we have to add that at a later date to the.
Well, to the master plan, okay.
right.
Yeah, I would buy that.
So okay, so is there a consensus on this?
Sounds like we're towards a consensus here. So
I agree.
does that give you enough direction?
Yes, but we particularly like the idea if you have a small working subcommittee or someone we get quick design feedback from, that would be very helpful.
It would speed our meetings up.
Yeah, but the main point is that we have the consensus that we're for the retrofit site. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So do we want to have an ad hoc committee?
I think.
Ad hoc design committee.
Ad hoc design committee?
Yeah,
I know
well, I'll be on it.
Commissioner Slater Carter and Commissioner Chen Corrali seem interested in that type of committee. So I have no objection to appointing those two as ad hoc committee to help provide direction and input.
Yeah, we like to stay on the rails as much as possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. We want to stay on the rails too.
Okay.
Parking lot back there, buildings up here.
Yeah, see if there's.
Okay.
Is there any more, is there any public comment? People
In the parking lot.
hands raised? Okay.
That's sharp, but
There is a second.
we can dig into the building.
They've already spoken once.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
There is one hand raised, but they've already spoken.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
There's no new.
okay. That's good then. Okay.
Old and wrinkled hand. That'd be my hand.
Any more business on this topic then? Okay.
Ad hoc committee is formed.
Ad hoc committee is Commissioner Slater Carter and Commissioner Chan Crowley.
Okay.
And that committee can be put together, I mean, on a timing that suits Jim and our consultant. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you. Thank you,
presentation. It's
Jim.
very helpful.
I think we're going to have fun. Even more fun.
Okay, moving along, that takes us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Takes us to item number 10, Surface Beach update. Mr. Moran.
Hi, Commissioners. This is an update on the Surfers Beach project, the Surfers Beach Sand Replenishment Pilot Project, and our project for over 7 years. Brad Dammit is going to give us an update on the project. Brad?
Okay. Thank you, John. Fellow commissioners, staff, appreciate the opportunity to give this update. Let me just share my screen, turn on my video, and unmute myself.
I think you just leave it muted, Brad, and we can pick you up with
Unmute
our.
myself, so I'm being my, okay, thank you.
Waiting for this.
Yeah.
I will do the video. Okay. And I will start the presentation.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So the last time I came to give a presentation and update on Surfers Beach was back in January. And at that time, all indications, we had announced that we would be going to construction in the late spring and summer for the project. All indications that we had from the permitting agencies at that time was that this was a possibility. As Jim has announced already at a past board meeting, unfortunately, in all likelihood, we're now looking like we're going to have to delay the construction of the project until spring and summer of 2024. I'm going to provide some context about exactly where we're at and the reasons why the project is being delayed. However, I'll tell you right now, it's because we don't have the permits available. And in order to go out to bid and finalize the plans, we need to have permits in hand. And there's a number of constraints with the timeline of when we can move forward with eelgrass mitigation project, as well as placement of sand on the beach. So quickly to just provide some context, here's an image of Google Earth image of Pillar Point Harbor. You can see right over here on the right-hand side is Surfers Beach, excuse me. And then over on the other side of the outer breakwater, you can see there's a buildup of sand. And that gets to the two problems that the Surfers Beach project is aimed at addressing. You can see as soon as the outer breakwaters of the harbor were completed back in 1961, almost immediately the erosion rates at Surfers Beach, right outside of the harbor, just increased dramatically. And that was due to the placement of those outer breakwater structures and how it interfered with the transport of sand and the wave patterns. So existing conditions at Surfers Beach, this is a recent photo. It took a pounding over the last winter with all these storms, as did a lot of places. It's been a big issue of concern. Highway 1 is right to the right. You can see with the wave action pounding against that Caltrans revetment has undermined some of the rocks and the coastal trail as well. This other image right here kind of gets at the other issue. This is an older photo. You can see the shoaling during the low tide. The sand has just continued to build up inside the harbor. And given the recent storm activity, there's a lot more sand after this last winter series of storms in the harbor. So it continues to be an issue. So what the project is in the most basic terms, dredging sand from inside the harbor in that outer breakwater area and transporting it over to Surfers Beach. The outcomes that we're expecting are to improve the navigation within the outer harbor, removing that sand, improve impaired public access, and that's both inside the harbor with the sedimentation, but more importantly at Surfers Beach, where we've seen a lot of hazards to surfers and people who go to recreate on the beach because the waves are just smashing right up against the rocks during those conditions. We expect it to mitigate recreational impacts, including what I just mentioned to surfing and other recreational activities, mitigate damages to coastal storms. So building up a beach platform that will make the waves break out farther and not directly on that coastal protective structure that is protecting Highway 1. And then also to create beach habitat where it doesn't currently exist and all the ecological benefits that come along with that. So one of the big components of the project is eelgrass mitigation. As you can see from this image, the green dots show where eelgrass is actually established inside the harbor. It's not a natural condition for eelgrass to be in those areas. It has established itself because of the shoaling of the harbor becoming shallower, and eelgrass has been allowed to build up. We found out about this at the end of 2019 when we were doing some permit application surveys, and that kind of threw a monkey wrench into the project planning, because what we had to do is develop an eelgrass mitigation and management plan for the entire harbor to be able to address the damages that the dredging would cause to the existing eelgrass beds. And this is a requirement of multiple permitting agencies. It's not anything that we could talk our way out of or convince them that it's not necessary. But as we worked on this plan several years ago, we did it with extensive amount of agency input. We had multi-agency workshops. We worked with them to get their buy-in, and that was all integrated into the plans that our engineering team at ESA came up with for the project. So that brings me to some updates on the engineering and design process. I have shared in past presentations 30% design plans for the project. I'm happy to report that our engineering team, led by Louis White and Bob Battaglio at ESA, have the final plans in production. I'll show you some previews of that in a couple of slides. We made updates to the past version of the plans based on permitting agency requirements. As well, they've developed technical specifications, which is basically the document that's required to put it out to bid, telling the potential contractors all of the details, all the mitigation measures and things that are required. So in order to finalize these plans and the technical specifications and the adaptive management plan, we need to have permits in hand. Having said that, our engineering and design team is prepared to quickly turn it around in really timely manner. It's not going to be a delay once we get the permits. They'll be able to, within a couple of weeks, integrate all that information in and then promptly get this thing out to the bid process. Specific details of the project, we plan to dredge between 75,000 and 100,000 cubic yards of sand from inside the harbor, place that on Surface Beach. That depends on available budget, but our permit applications are all for a maximum volume of 100,000. It's a pilot project, so we're not going to be allowed to move forward with a larger project because it's in the National Marine Sanctuary. But what we're expecting is to measure the results, and if it's successful, to move forward with the larger projects in the future. The project will create 4.7 acres of beach habitat and almost 4 acres of new eelgrass habitat. The next steps, as I mentioned with the engineering and design, is to get that final information. And that information doesn't only include permits, but also some biological surveys that I'll explain that so that we can put the project out to bid. Okay, so just real quickly, I'm going to show you a few of the updated plans. This is showing you, if you start from the left, bottom left, moving up to the top right, this would be the eelgrass mitigation area. So there's some existing eelgrass there. We picked this area. We had a team of biologists who surveyed the bathymetry and the eelgrass and found that it doesn't exist in other places of the harbor. That's probably because of some kind of environmental conditions, like not enough water circulation, possibly too many nutrients. Whatever the reason is, our experts have told us that the best place to do it is over here in this corner, away from the need to dredge for navigation, away from the large amount of recreational activities that can damage the eelgrass beds like clamming. And that was just the area that made sense. So the other highlights here, right here, you can see we have 2 proposed dredging areas. There's 3 zones off of the boat launch ramp, and then 3 more zones over here along the outer breakwater. And then you can see the top right eelgrass bed is going to be left in place for monitoring purposes. So it's a reference bed. The biologists want us to keep that so we can measure the success of the newly mitigated eelgrass to be able to determine that there's not some other factors causing decline in the health of the eelgrass. So that's why we keep that reference bed there, but we will be mitigating for the entire volume of eelgrass so that in the future we can dredge in that whole East Basin area. And then top right, you can't see real clearly, but that's the beach placement area where the sand would be placed in an overflow berm.
Where's that, Brad? I can't see.
Yeah. So
Right there.
this area here. So we would pump from these areas, sand and water mixture slurry would be pumped over along this outer breakwater, adjacent to the Caltrans revetment, and then be placed on the beach.
When was this supposed to happen?
The plan was that we were going to do it in the summer. So there's I'll get to
This part is the delay. Has been delayed, is that?
The whole thing comes as a package. So in order to get permission to do the eelgrass, we have to get permits for the whole project. I've already approached the permitting agencies and asked, can we just get permission, move forward with eelgrass, get that established in case we can't get permits for the whole project? And the answer was no, we need to do it all together. And that, I don't know if that's all the agencies, but certainly Coastal Commission. Here's just a more close up. One of the revisions we made is there is some concerns about potential contamination of sediments in these areas. We revised this slightly. The hatched area offshore of the boat launch ramps, this one, that area is destined for the eelgrass mitigation platform because it's a finer grain material, not suitable for placement on Surfers Beach. And then these other two zones in the inland portion here would be pumped over to Surfers Beach. It's not a great close-up. The new plans have it split into two things, so I kind of patched it together. But approximately 1,000 feet or so of shoreline, sand would be placed starting from the north. We would built up a containment berm, pump sand into that containment berm, and continue to expand it. Initially, the sanctuary was not going to allow placement of dredge material in the sanctuary itself within the boundaries, and we've overcome that, and now we've come up with a system where we can actually pump directly into the sanctuary and get it permitted. That was one big obstacle that we overcame early on. This is just a real, I'm going to hit this real quick. This is the eelgrass mitigation platform. It's about an almost 8 acre area. So it's a large area. And the proposal is in these shallow areas here to dredge that and to, in these deeper areas, fill that. So you have a more gradual platform that eelgrass can grow in the entirety. And what the eelgrass biologists did is they looked at the specific depths throughout the harbor where eelgrass was growing most healthiest. And that's how they came up with kind of that gradual platform. This is something that's being discussed right now by permitting agencies. I'll get into it. It could be that they're going to change these plans and we'll have to do something that's less intensive. That could be a good thing for the harbor district because this is certainly a large construction project. And that's something that the permitting agencies are discussing amongst themselves right now. But as it stands, this is what we're proposing as far as eelgrass mitigation. So permitting and CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act is required for all large projects in California. I think everybody's familiar with that. We got that out of the way last year, 2022, went through the public notification process and all the posting. There's copies of the final reports on the district website, the Surfers Beach webpage, as well as hard copies in the Harbor Master's office. No further steps required for that. Permitting process, just to kind of give a little context here, we're dealing with a lot of overlapping jurisdictions. We've got a National Marine Sanctuary. We need permits from Regional Water Quality Control Board, Sanctuary, Coastal Commission, Army Corps, National Marine Fisheries Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service need to consult on the project. And County of San Mateo and City of Half Moon Bay both have jurisdiction within the project footprint and need to provide approval, which we worked through already on that. The other thing that's making the project a bit difficult from a permitting perspective, in addition to the point that there's overlapping jurisdictions and it's unprecedented project for this area of coast in the National Marine Sanctuary, is that there are some sensitive habitats, believe it or not, within even the sanctuary, Pillar Point Harbor, and endangered species that are causing some delays in the review. So permit applications, after many years of closely consulting with the agencies and hosting interagency workshops and everything, we did submit permit applications in February of 2022. Since then, staff and myself and our engineers have been coordinating with the agencies to respond to kind of a unending stream of additional questions that they want us to address. And we've have definitely done our best to reply and address those concerns as quickly as possible. But they have just kept on coming. I think that we're over most of them at this point. Some of the things that they've required us to do, for example, we had to get a noise study done. So have an acoustic expert go out and set up noise monitoring equipment near Highway 1 in the harbor to get measurements of ambient noise, and then compare that to the potential project construction noise. And as was expected, there's already a heck of a lot of noise out there, and there's not going to be any disturbances. But that was a box that we had to check. Another one was to show them that there's no issues with chemical contamination within the sediments. We've done that. Another recent one is there's concerns about sensitive habitats and species. We had a coastal ecologist do an additional analysis and determine that that's not going to be an issue. So these are the kind of things that we've been working through with the permanent agencies, just so you understand that we haven't been sitting on our hands and just waiting inactively. The eelgrass mitigation requirements, I addressed that already. They're still being discussed. National Marine Fisheries Service, as part of their consultation with Army Corps of Engineers, raised some concerns with the heavy level of construction activities in that area that would involve excavation and placement of sediment. And they are proposing to do something that would be a little bit less expensive from a construction standpoint, and maybe just placing the eelgrass without that platform and having some, I won't say leniency, but an understanding that eelgrass habitat is not naturally occur in that area and that it may not be a success. So that's something that's being dealt with between Coastal Commission, CPFW, Regional Board, and National Marine Fisheries Service. We're confident, very confident that we're going to get this. None of the agencies are opposing the project. No one's against it. They all, in fact, support it. It's just these concerns have come up, and there's to be frank, the permitting system, we live in California, we've got the strictest environmental regulations probably in the world, and the permitting system is really kind of a broken system. They've got a small handful of staff dealing with all these issues, and it's costing the economy billions of dollars. It's just wasted time and delays, and it's something that's hitting us over and over again. The Harbor District, and it's really quite aggravating. I think everybody's trying to address that, but that's just where we're at right now. It's not that the permitting agency staff are incompetent. In fact, they're very competent. They just, are overwhelmed, and they haven't been able to respond and review this and give it the attention that it needs. Funding and grants, the district and staff and consultants, we've been really actively throughout this project been seeking new grant funding. Since 2020, we've applied for more than 10 grants. We haven't had the best luck because it's a beach nourishment project that is related to dredging of a harbor, and that's just not a fashionable thing right now, and it's not in an economically disadvantaged area, so we don't check a lot of the boxes that some of these recent announcements require. But we have received several grants, $800,000 for construction from Division of Boating and Waterways. Ocean Protection Council provided $75,000 towards the planning process, and then NOAA, in partnership with Greater Farallon Sanctuary, is providing $125,000 for biological surveys and biological related project costs. So we do have some. Most recently, we applied for a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant about 3 weeks ago. We'll see what happens, based on the track record. Not super positive about that, but it would be great to get some more opportunities. We'll continue to track these, as well as looking into potential contributions from the multiple beneficiaries of the project, including City of Half Moon Bay, which has jurisdiction on the beach, Caltrans, which obviously has a responsibility to protect their highway, and County of San Mateo, which has jurisdiction on the bluffs all the way down that stretch of coast. So, the Harbor District has jurisdiction of the below the mean high water line in the area. And like I said, a lot of overlapping jurisdiction, but the Harbor District, one misconception is that the Harbor District does not own that beach, Surfers Beach area. It's not responsible for the management of it. So it's kind of a win-win partnership type of project. If we can get it permitted and constructed. So last cost estimate, which has a lot of kind of wiggle room, which was provided as an initial cost estimate by our engineers at ESA, was anywhere from 2.9 to 3.6 million, depending on the volume of the project. That's with a 30% contingency, a lot of, so it's not super precise, but they're working on a updated engineer's estimate. And then the eelgrass restoration portion, we're looking at approximately 1.8 million to do the concept that I showed before. One important thing to mention about the eelgrass mitigation is we're going to be required to mitigate for whatever volume of eelgrass is in the harbor at the time that we're prepared to go into construction. So this is where it gets really
That's going to
complicated.
grow even more.
Well, so
It's going to be.
one positive and negative at the same time thing is that it looks like the test beds took a beating over the winters.
Over the storms, yeah.
Yeah, so they're smaller now,
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a prediction of what's going to be next year.
But once we receive the permits, then we're locked in at just that amount.
Yeah, but this has been going on for almost 10 years since I've been on this. And it just keeps being drawn out. And it seems like the eelgrass mitigation issue continues. And unfortunately, it continues to grow and it becomes a bigger issue. And at some point, we're not going to be able to deal with it.
Was there a mitigation requirement 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, or is it
1.2 to 1?
2 to 1.
I'm going to interject with something that sounds like a off topic, but it's not. As you guys know, I'm on the Montero Water and Sanitary District Board. And when we ended our moratorium on new water connections, I happened to go into the city to talk to some folks that I knew at Coastal Commission about how we were going to proceed with new wells and new connections and new pipelines and all of this stuff that you need to do. And, oh gosh, I've forgotten who it was, Chris maybe, who said, why don't you get a public works plan to tie all of these projects together so that they're all under one staff person, one review, so that Coastal is aware of all the stuff you're doing. And at the end of it, it takes a little while, at the end of it, you have your own public works plan directly with Coastal. It has saved MWSC millions of dollars and many, many, many potential appeals, both to the county, which start at a low level and then get more expensive as they go up. And we work within the framework of this public works plan that was developed jointly between our engineers, Coastal, and our board. And county had it, everybody had their input onto it. But we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, and we've had this public works plan in for about 15 years. And it has saved us so much money in being able to get projects done. and in being able to have a unified vision for coastal and the regulatory agencies so they know where we're going. And just listening to this discussions on Surfers Beach and on the new retail center, I would love to be able to go into coastal and say, hey guys, look at what we're doing. We're doing this wonderful eelgrass project and people can come over here and see the eelgrass. And we're taking care of all these issues at once on these two projects. I would love to have a future agenda item on this, but I can tell you, please call Clemens Heldmeyer at MWSD and talk to, by the way, Coastal drove our engineers crazy. But we have such a good working relationship with Coastal now and with the water agencies and so on. I think instead of doing this piecemealing that this district has been doing, we would do better to take an overall look, because our strategic plan, what we're doing now, is so wonderful. Let's get it all under one umbrella so we can get moving on it. Because these delays, 7 years is expensive. Just saying, I think, I'm sorry we are having more problems with permits for an agency that wants to do the right thing.
So it sounds like the eelgrass is still the major button that's slowing us down. I mean, all the agencies agree, they all like it. The problem is, again, limited amount of because everybody's adding a little more to it all the time as we go. So it's still the eelgrass one.
So, yeah, and here's the deal. So it's not that the permits are that far away from a time frame perspective. It's that we have a tight timeline between construction. So once we get approval, we have to then go out immediately and do an eelgrass survey. That eelgrass survey is good for 60 days, no longer than 60 days, right? Once we get that eelgrass survey, the engineers then have to go and update the plans so we can put that out to bid so people have the accurate extent of what we need to mitigate for, right? That bid process lasts for a month, right? If everything goes right. And then after that month, then the contractor has to get everything in gear, figure out their equipment, mobilize to the process. At that point, that puts us, at least midsummer. With eelgrass, in order to have some chance of success, you need to have the eelgrass transplants be present within the growing season for a long enough time to establish, right? The growing season in Northern California is from April 1st to October 31st, I believe. So, if we don't do it by June, July, maybe at the latest, then we risk not having those eelgrass transplants get established and then
vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. So through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Virginia.
So I looked at some of the permitting agencies that you had up there, and I was curious. Have they given you input on this project at all?
We've had a ton of input. Yeah, but
it just seems like this delay is this vicious cycle, and I'm not saying that y'all can't avoid or that you'll have a conflict of interest, but there is a perceived conflict of interest when there are multiple agencies under the same consulting firm with possible competing interests. And so I just want to understand what has been happening on that front, if there's anything. I don't know.
So, all of the permitting agencies are governmental entities.
In counties, San Mateo County and Half Moon Bay. So are they for all of this? Have they helped move this forward?
Yeah, so the county of San Mateo and the city of Half Moon Bay have deferred to the Coastal Commission to lead the permitting process, and the district as the main, permanent applicant. There's no conflict of interest, really. So with the way that the California Coastal Act works is each area, has.
I know.
Yeah, I understand. So, if the commission taking the lead in issuing the coastal development permit.
There was a report about the outer breakwater being recommended that, we look at possibly removing that. And I'm wondering how that's affecting all of this in the big picture scheme of things.
Yeah, I think that was a one shoreline project. That's completely unrelated to this. And as I understand.
But the person who is part of the city of Half Moon Bay was chairing that effort. And so that's why I'm just trying to understand where this holdup is. I know it's with the eelgrass issue, but if there are competing interests under the same consulting umbrella, I think that we're entitled to know what potential conflicts there might be, if any. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I think what you're getting at, I think the engineers who are working on this project also provided some input for the one shoreline, and the company is ESA. But there's no conflict of interest. That's a completely unrelated. I don't know much about that. I was not involved in it, but I know that it was just kind of a completely unrelated to this. And I don't think they went anywhere with it. I'm not sure what's happening with it, but it's just put that aside. That's not related. That has nothing to do with the permits or the possibility of our permits getting more delayed or anything like that. That's a completely.
Hope not. Sorry.
We've had a lot of this. Do we have any hands from the public raised on this?
Yes, we have.
Take a break.
Mark, would like to speak?
Break for public comment.
We have one public comment that was submitted by email that I forwarded to the entire board.
Oh, yeah.
So if the board would like that read out loud, we can do that, or?
That was in the packet.
It was in the packet, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want, is there interest in hearing those comments or the email?
I think the public deserves to have them.
It's really, I think it's just one, right?
For this one, yes, just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to read out the public comment that we received on Tuesday, April 18th. States, Dear Harbor Commission, you announced that the dredging project would begin this spring. Highway 1 has almost been destroyed due to the many years of delay. What is the official start date for the long-awaited dredging at Pillar Point Harbor and necessary beach nourishing?
Do we have anybody that's currently on online comments? None. Okay, great, thanks.
But I believe Mark wanted to speak.
I just do one thing real quick. I have one more slide that kind of addresses that last comment. I'll do it very quickly.
My comment?
No.
Email.
It's a public comment.
Yes. Okay, so the answer isn't going to be satisfying. The answer is the district will put the project out to bid quickly once the permits are finalized. We don't know when that's going to be. I'm assuming it's going to be in the summer, and we're going to be able to put it out to bid late summer or fall, and get all our ducks in a row and prepared for the spring as early as we can. So when April 1st comes around, we get that eelgrass survey done, and we're going to need to figure out something with the bid process where we put it out to bid without the specific amount, but we do it with maybe the 2019 extent, and then ask for a per unit, per square meter cost or something for the dredging.
If idealistically, if your deadline to start planting would be 1 July to make it successful, is that correct? Or is it 1 August? Do we know when you would have to start to make the eelgrass successful?
Of 2024.
This year.
Oh, of 2023?
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried.
Oh,
So this year, you were saying if everything worked well, we got to start transplanting by 1st of July?
I think that's, I think that would be probably at the later end. I'm not a biologist. I don't know that.
Well, there's got to be a drop dead. There's some biologist going to say no, by 1 October, definitely not. By 1 September, you may not have enough time. I'm trying to work backwards, saying you'd have to have the permits by tomorrow if you want to try to do any transplant by 1 August. I don't know what those dates are, but I'm just wondering.
Okay, so what I've been told is June would still be okay. Any past June, and we're pushing it, but it's still possible.
Mark, did you want to make a comment?
Chair, Commissioners, Mark Massara. Initially, I want to say that I'm a huge advocate for this project, like 1,010%, but and I'm not alone. I mean, the entire community wants this thing yesterday. But we're beleaguered at this point because this is taking so long while dredging projects are occurring up and down the state in Santa Barbara and San Diego. They're doing huge nourishment projects, and they're dumping hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of sediments on the beaches in Carpinteria and Goleta right now. They're dredging the Carpinteria estuary right now. And so clearly other offices of the commission, the Coastal Commission, are able to process these projects. And while I commend your staff and Brad's efforts here, particularly with respect to getting the consolidation and deferrals from the county and the city of Half Moon Bay, Coastal Commission staff can routinely sit on something for years, even after it's deemed complete. So if I understand this correctly, there's been a lot of collaboration, but a public hearing is still going to be required in front of the Coastal Commission before the project's approved. That, even if it's deemed complete tomorrow, it could take you a year to get on the agenda. And then there could be special conditions that take another year or more to fulfill before you're actually allowed to dredge. And what coastal staff may well do is require the eelgrass up front. And if there was ever anything that fulfills this no good deed goes unpunished mantra, it's having artificial man-made eelgrass growing because of the delays for dredging. And now it's a third of the cost of your project. To make a long story short here, what you need to do is prepare for emergency action here. The road is falling apart, and what you're trying to do, and this should help with the funding, is do climate resiliency and adaptation, because if you don't do this dredging, Caltrans is gonna have to dump more rocks and build seawalls at Surfers Beach to protect the road. So the dredging is actually a passive, climate sensitive project that needs to go forward. And if Coastal Commission is not going to be able to wrap their mind around it, the county can issue emergency permits to go forward now, like other communities are doing up and down the state. And then you pick up the pieces and do the regular permitting thereafter. And this could help with both, expediting this work as well as the long-term funding associated with the project. And I'm certainly willing to help you and your staff in that regard. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Tom, yes.
This permitting process tremendously reminds me of Charlie Brown and the football. It just, the amount of time we're spend applying, and we think we're so close, there it's gone again. Now we got to apply for more permits. We need more OKs. I agree with what the past speaker just said about trying to press people and push things ahead and somehow get this permitting done. The community is tremendously behind it. Everybody wants it. It's just amazing to think that we keep adding layers of bureaucracy that somebody else wants to rubber stamp this, and suddenly somebody else has got their hand out for a permit for something that's just so challenging to get something done.
Commissioner Dunbar, you have your hand up.
Things happen. I mean, I've experienced the same kind of type of activity in many different harbors up and down California. A quick example, in Newport Harbor, there was a federal channel, federal responsibility to dredge that the locals did not need for a long period of time. Well over 20 years, it wasn't dredged. Still a federal channel, still on the books, never dredged. Locals wanted it dredged, federal responsibility, but now there's eelgrass growing and it was shut down. Basically, that channel was then no longer available to locals. Going back 15 years or more, maybe 20 years on this project, prior to eelgrass even probably existing there, the challenge was always the marine sanctuary not allowing, quote unquote, what they called back then, dredge spoil material, or spoil material to be excavated by man's hands and placed on the beach. That was frustrating for over 20 years for those of us who were saying that's clean sand. It's sand because of the particle size, and it's beach quality material. Absolutely not. So those are the challenges, and we still haven't gotten now. I mean, it was only until a couple of years ago that the eelgrass issue came up. Everything was ready to go.
Yeah.
And in the last 5-6 years, even the Marine Sanctuary said, okay, let's do a demonstration. Let's look at what will happen and how the process and all of those things are part of that process. So it is very frustrating, and I'm now frustrated with the point that there's still more of an eelgrass issue. But everybody likes this project. Yes, they're dredging Channel Islands Harbor right now over 800,000 to 1 million cubic yards of sand on the beach. They do that almost yearly. So, but there's no, there's no eelgrass in the way, or there's not some other endangered species
Because they're dredging.
So, I'm hoping we're going to get there.
Regina, I guess one last comment.
Yeah, so when we were at the CMAC thing in Washington, the event in Washington, I mean, the beauty of having some event like that is that you get to hear what other harbors and ports are doing throughout California. And I agree with the speaker that there's a lot of activity in terms of the dredging up and down the coast of California. So I don't know. At some point, you almost have to begin to wonder if there's some intentional stalling here, because I don't understand how other areas, and I get not every area has eelgrass, but the eelgrass is a vicious cycle, right? You don't dredge, you get it, but you can't dredge because you have it, and it continues to grow. And I don't understand why we're having this problem based on the CMAC events and meetings that we had. Other projects seem to just be able to move forward. Right. I mean, didn't you get that impression from them?
Yeah, and I don't know if their specific projects are that similar to ours.
Yeah.
Every project's going to be unique on the coast, I'm afraid. So,
yeah.
I will say that I recently subscribed to a magazine from the East Coast called Coast and something or other, and they were talking about the California storms. And there was a whole article on this stretch of Highway 1 with photos from Coastal Commission. I agree with the speaker. I suggest we take him up on his offer and that we do this as an emergency project and get it going. I think that there is so much public angst over the condition of Highway 1. And Harbor District could be the heroes if we could get this going. So whatever it takes, I think what we've been doing for the past 7 years has been good preparatory, but let's take advantage, to quote, I've forgotten who it was, let's take advantage of this disaster and make some good news out of it.
I think it's very critical to take a look at the damages occurring close to Highway 1 right now and have somebody put attention on that. But let me tell you, 75,000 to 100,000 is not going to provide protection to that highway.
Right.
Please remember that. This is only a demonstration for mostly the Marine Sanctuary of what can be done. You're going to need a lot more sand, maybe sand, structure, hybrid, whatever. That does not prevent damages to Highway 1. That's a different issue that either the county has to get together with Caltrans. I mean, it's a Caltrans issue. I don't think they're going to dump rock. And I mean, certainly they won't be allowed to dump rock because you'd have to engineer a structure. You just can't dump rock anymore. They're going to move the highway, but let them do that.
Oh, that's good. Wrong topic.
But I'm saying let them get into
the agenda item. I suggest, but I'd love to talk to you about it because I can hear the high energy explosions going off in the houses behind us.
I don't disagree.
People hearing about this, but I think let's see how using offered help and our staff and other consultants, let's see how far we can take this. Let's see what we can do using the emergency of Highway 1 and our authority over that section of the ocean.
Well, I think at our last meeting, we talked about trying to pull together like a workshop with all of these concerned parties and bring them all together, the county, Caltrans.
Let's just get a few people who know what they're doing, like you and Mark and attorneys and Jim, and some of us can sit in and listen. And just get it going. The more people you have, the less work gets done and the longer it takes. Let's get the plan and then tell them what they're going to agree to.
Okay, if we do that, I guess, what is the best way to come up with a plan to make that happen?
George, Jim, our speaker, Brad. Let's get people who know what they're doing, who are familiar with this project, and just go for it. And you can always peel parts off, but let's take it as an emergency and see how far we can push. Just saying.
Let me just say, interject real quick, just say that in my 7 years with the district, Brad was just he'd already started on working with the Marine Sanctuary and all of the interested parties to make the project move forward. We've had continual professional groups meeting in this office for years, multiple times, everybody involved. And for the most part, everybody was very positive, just exactly as everybody's talking about now. There were challenges, like Brad was able he was instrumental in making it happen, and we went to a lot of the Coastal Commission meetings and the National Marine Sanctuary meetings, and we're able to work through the challenges with putting dredge spoils in the sanctuary. That was a huge hurdle that took quite some time. Then, as George said, relatively recently, just in the last couple of years, the eelgrass challenge arose, and we've been working through that as well. I think it's important to acknowledge that we do have, I think, in our consultant, Brad Damitz, a premier professional that has a good relationship with all of the different entities that he's built up even before coming to work for the district on this project. But has continued to build those relationships during the last 7-8 years working on this project. Brad, can I ask you to interject on what your belief is at present on the suggestion that maybe we leverage the disaster of the historic rains and strong winds in potentially moving the project forward? Do you think that's realistic or not?
Given the time frame and the fact that we need to get the sand on Surfers Beach, there's also a time frame for that. I mentioned the eelgrass constraints. For Surfers Beach, we don't want to put it out too late in the summer or the fall. We need to let it kind of equilibrate over the place down, kind of settle into place. And then we've been advised by the technical advisory group that advised the project not to do it in the fall or winter, because we risk putting it out. For example, if we had put it out, all that sand out there, September of this year, with the winter storms, wipe it out with a few large storms. It's not that big of a volume. We could complete the surveys that are required and get everything done in time. And certainly, I would a wealth of knowledge and experience and obviously not as pessimistic as I am about that project. But I think with the emergency approach, they're going to need us to prove that it's, there's an immediate threat, or we need to repair damage by an emergency. And the fact that the summer is approaching and that buys us time is not going to be viewed as such an emergency by the permitting agency.
But I guess I'm trying to look at a way of communicating to the powers that be, the permitting authorities, the concern that this district has, that, we've already lost a year, we've lost continual years. We just want to make sure we don't lose another one.
And it's not just this district, it's the entire community.
Right, but I think we're trying to just mirror their concerns.
Yeah.
But it's not just our problem. The future solution for Highway 1 in that area is a county-wide problem. It's a county problem, not just a harbor. So yes, we have a short-term demonstration of placing dredged material that is suitable for the beach on the beach. That's not going to stay there very long, but it's going to give us some information. The problem of, well, okay, how do you protect for next winter for the emergency? That's a different question. And not necessarily, I mean, we're part of that whole little system in there, but you need other players in there. And I think if we're saying the other player really up front is going to be the county and the city of Hackett.
Right, but I think there's a lot of frustration here that we can't seem to get off square one on our piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, other people have parts of that puzzle too, but we just want to get moving with ours.
I don't know. Is there a button, you know, I mean, is there a political button we can push? I guess I would ask Brad. I mean, it's still a holdup with personnel, right? There's just not enough people to rapidly look at things. So how do you put pressure to have that happen? I don't think you can.
Yeah, I just haven't had any luck with that. One of the problems.
I know you would have been pressuring them anyway.
Yeah. And one of the problems is they have to vet.
The Senate,
They have an engineer, they have a biologist, ecologist, they have a geologist. So that's one desk that this thing has to sit on.
So our earlier speaker did make a really good comment about getting on a consent calendar for Coastal Commission. And he mentioned the challenge of it maybe even being a year before we can get on it with that kind of thing.
So I'm not thinking a year. The last conversation, Commission, when they first mentioned that there's going to be today, which was prior to when Jim announced previous meeting, was that they didn't think that they'd be able to, they didn't have enough staff power to be able to process it and get it in front of the commission. And they only
But it won't happen in the next 2 months.
and even if it does, I'm saying what I'm saying.
It's just looking like the time frame is, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
We're in the beaches cycle. That's how I look at it.
Dredges have already been dedicated for the rest of the year.
That's the other thing.
So even if we had it, there's limited
Not
dredges.
available.
Yeah.
But this,
Okay.
I mean,
At
one
this-
right side, if I could present it, is, you know, construction experts have told us that we can 20 to 30% by putting it out to bid in the fall rather than in the spring, because everybody schedules built up. So I mean, that's one positive aspect, but discouraging is kind of what we're dealing with. I'm happy to participate in any efforts and discussions to try and make it happen quicker.
George, is there any benefit to having maybe your subcommittee look at this further, or
That's
try
what
to
I would do.
figure out, is there something we can poke on?
That's what I was glad you did that. Where can we poke if we can?
George and Tom, right?
We just had that
Yes, we
discussion
have.
today.
Okay, let's take the public comment then.
All right, thank you for taking my comment. I'm not entirely sure you can hear me. A lot of what I've been hearing at this end has been cutting in and out. The key here, Virginia, is nobody is running a conspiracy against the Harbor District. I know that the permitting issues are tough in California and on the coast, but maybe they should have been tougher when the Harbor District was first laid out. Because maybe if someone had done a little extra studies, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. And I know it's tempting to blame other agencies, but the truth of it is, you have not even had a meeting on the sediment committee or anything else related to Surfers Beach. The special committees are just dead. No one's done anything for multiple years. So I'm kind of like wondering why you think you're in a position to blame this on other people or other agencies. I don't really hold a lot of hope that you're going to take anything, do anything about it, because you don't have any money. You wasted it horribly over the last couple decades. And B, you're blaming it on someone else. And that's just perfect, because that's the surest way to make sure nothing gets done, is to blame it on somebody else. You wasted half the time I've been listening to you, blaming it on somebody else, not talking about what you could do. Commissioner Slater-Carter is the only one that seems to get it, that this is becoming an emergency, and it will become an emergency, that wave is coming and that road will be cut off. And glibly saying you're just going to move it east, if you think you've got problems putting something out west of the highway, wait till you try moving that highway east. You will see a lot of pushback.
Thank you for your comments. Well, hopefully we've demonstrated our frustration. And I think everybody else, I'm kind of at a loss for a solution here, other than just to make you aware that we are tremendously frustrated not being able to move on this issue. Hopefully, if we have the subcommittee at least take maybe a more active interest in this, might be useful to help any assistance that they can provide to you in making the powers that be in the agencies aware of that level of frustration and moving as quickly as we can. I don't want to be at the same place a year from now saying, oh, gee, we lost another year.
Yeah. I'd like to see, would it take, do we need a motion or just, I'll give you my opinion. I'd like to see Jim, John, the committee, Brad, and Mark sit down and talk about how to get this thing moved under the emergency that it is. The folks who live on the coast, for the folks who live on the coast, any loss of Highway 1 will be a major emergency.
Yeah.
And I think if we get together, if they, Jim et al., get together this committee and they come up with stuff, I think all the other agencies and so on, they don't know, they're good-hearted. Let's put together a plan and tell them this is what a good plan this is, and we need to do it now. And part of it is to get the eelgrass going, and just because that's the first step in solving this emergency. So let's see how we can do it with advice under emergency regs.
Virginia.
So I agree, but Mark can comment as a public commenter, but unless we hire him to do this or work with us, I don't know if we're going to do that, but I'm just saying we can't commit him to doing this. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the committee should work to figure out how we can get past this. And I think the emergency exception is definitely something that should be looked at a minimum with the consultants and the committee. And quite frankly, I'm not sure why the consultants haven't even brought this up to us. Why is that as a possible exception?
As the emergency exception?
Yeah.
One, it's not the purpose of the project. So
the purpose of the project is to get it done.
Right. What we're trying to do is prove that in concept that we can take dredge material, which was in the past illegal to put on into the marine sanctuary. And then, so this is a pilot project to do that. So the purpose is of the highway protection and protection of the road or the trail is a secondary issue associated with this. The other thing is that the trail and the road are not Harbor District property. So it's not the Harbor District emergency. So we have to come in and work with other agencies to declare an emergency, and then we can help them with their emergency. The highway, Caltrans has been there and inspecting it. The county's been there and inspected it, and neither have declared it an emergency.
I'm working with a local who's working on this project. I will get a hold of him and tell him it's an emergency and tell him to get in touch with the committee.
Yeah, because we can help others with their emergency, and they can help us get the permit as a secondary, but it's really isn't the district's.
I understand, but I mean, right now, we have been, I understand that. I totally understand, and George has made that pretty clear too. But, I mean, we are a countywide agency. We are a coast side agency. And if we see with all of these storms and who knows what's going to happen next time, I mean, I do think we have a duty to at least spot that as a potential problem that could be an emergency. Just, I know it's not necessarily within our jurisdiction and our authority, but right now we're in this place that it could be an emergency that could actually harm us too. I mean, do we have to wait until something actually happens and then react, or can we be proactive?
Everything you're talking about, we have shared with all the permitting agencies verbally. Both I have, John, and the consultants. We haven't done it formally in a letter from the board, but talking with them and working with them is, we have brought up the fact that the coastal trail is gone. And we brought up the fact that their riprap, what they put in, that was supposed to be the fix, and with a 50-year lifespan, didn't last 5 years. So we brought all that up with the state and with the county. And if they, again, they've been out here, both agencies inspected it, and I haven't heard anything about them declaring it an emergency. Now, that doesn't mean the Harbor District doesn't have an interest in making sure or trying to help. And as a secondary part of this project, that's a fantastic benefit that I tried to sell too, because more sand on the beach means more protection for Highway 1, the coastal trail, and also the park that's losing a foot or two every year.
Right.
We need more sand on that beach to do that protection. And that's a fantastic goal for the project. And we have been selling that and we have been discussing it, not necessarily as an emergency, but we're trying to push and try to get them to declare emergencies for county property and for state property. And neither agency does not seem to be interested in that right now. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to continue to push. I will say that over the last year, we have been moving the permitting forward. We really have. And we're getting down to very technical questions that they're coming back for. So they are looking at our permits. If you use a football analogy, I think 2 years ago, we were on our own 5-yard line. Now I think we're on their 5-yard line and we can punch it through over this year. So the way we're doing it right now, I think we'll get to it, just not this year. We're going to get to it next year. And with talking with the agencies, they all agree that that's realistic, that can happen.
Said that every year. So
They probably might have.
Well, we still have the
But that's where I'm
budget to
at.
discuss.
I know. But anyway, giving direction, and you want to give direction, I guess the committee will look at this, and what's the direction?
Well, I guess I just asked the committee to put this on your agenda to see if that's something that we can help with and work with Jim on that.
And don't get me wrong, I'm extremely frustrated with it.
Yeah.
We had to reapply for a permit on this year's permit form because it was obsolete from last year's permit form. Things like that. And it's, okay, we'll resubmit under a different form. Very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, frustrated out here.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's move along to item number 11, district license agreements. Jim, this is yours.
Back to it. Thank you, President. I've dropped your last name. I apologize.
That's fine. Sometimes too.
Commissioners, over the last year or so, I've been working with General Counsel and with staff, and to include the harbor masters, to review the license agreements, both for berth license agreement, pulling to an actual berth and tying up, mooring and anchorage, where we can moor to the district-owned mooring balls that we have, and or anchorage in the outer harbor. Transient vessel license agreement, those vessels that are just coming down and stopping at our harbor for a few days and moving on. And then liveaboard license agreements for vessels who already have a berthing agreement but want to move to be able to live on board their vessel. So we reviewed the current permits that we used to have, and we didn't have all these separate permits. But I thought it was very important to break out the berth agreement with the mooring agreement, anchorage agreement, transient vessel, because there's all different needs and requirements that need to be met. In rewriting this agreement, we wrapped in a lot of the language from the current ordinance to make it more clear that, and also provided to the tenant or the permittee or licensee for the permit there, so they're aware of the requirements. One of the changes that we did, or it's not a change, but we wanted to highlight that each license is valid for 1 month. It automatically renews upon payment of the required fees. However, failure to pay the fees, license fee on time, can result in the license being terminated. Vessels that anchor, moor, or berth at the district facility for more than 12 continuous months must reapply for a license on that 12th month and pay the appropriate fees and provide all the required documentation. This way we can ensure the vessels have the required license from the state or document from the federal government, also proper insurance, ownership, and all the other required documentation that we have, and we can issue a new license based on that. And that's an annual requirement. Right now, it's not a requirement. Their permits just renew.
Sorry. Okay.
A vessel required to obtain insurance to anchor, moor, or berth at the district facilities if they're going to be here more than 30 days. Beginning January 1st, 2024, we're proposing in the licenses that vessels be assessed a fine of $150 each for a month if they fail to maintain the required insurance. This $150 is a fine. It is not an insurance policy and does not insure the vessel or its owner from any damages that they cause. Transient vessels at anchor will only be allowed 2 days before fees begin to assess. Transient vessels utilizing a berth at district-owned mooring will be assessed the appropriate fees upon arrival. So if they actually tie up to a mooring ball or tie up into a berth, fees will be assessed the first day. If they drop anchor, they have 48 hours to sit out there. And if they want to stay longer, they're welcome to, but they will have to apply for a license to do so. Each draft license has been reviewed by General Counsel for legal sufficiency. Today, I'm simply presenting these licenses to you for as informational. I'm not asking for approval at this time. I wanted to make sure that the public had plenty of opportunity to review it, and that also bringing it to your attention the direction in which staff is moving with these licensing. And with that, each license is attached. The highlights I just went over, and again, they're informational only for the board, and the public is encouraged to review the licenses and provide feedback. I will be bringing back these licenses to the board in May for approval based on the feedback I received.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this? No public comment.
I have one written public comment that we received that if the board would like me to read, I can read that.
Yes, want to do that.
Find it again. This one's a little longer, so think I can read it within the 2-minute time limit. San Mateo County Harbor District staff and harbor commissioners, this email is in response to the new license agreements proposed by you in your staff report for meeting dated April 19th, 2023. Ms. Haddon, I would like my last email that you had slated for said meeting to be stricken from being read at the meeting and for this email to be read in its stead with the course correction or redactions of my personal information of mine. Please forward a copy with said redactions before posting. My concern regarding recommendations of the berth agreement license and live aboard license agreement. 1, under background and discussion, you state the current agreements are several years old and not aligned with the district ordinances or practices. How exactly are current agreements not aligned with the district ordinances or practices? Please be specific in your answer. How does completing a review and rewrite of each permit bring them up to date and in compliance with district rules, regulation, and ordinances? Please be specific in your answer. Said recommendations seem to me to be, in my opinion, a grab for more power and control over marina tenants. I will explain. Over the course of 2 to 3 years, I and other marina tenants have been the victim of constant harassment and lies perpetrated by marina staff regarding parking, of all things. I have had to resort to using my very private disability in order to suppress the said harassment, but lies continue to this day. I have carefully documented all instances of harassment and lies, including cease and desist letter sent to Mr. Pruitt and others, of which Mr. Pruitt emailed the staff, do not reply, and Ms. Van Hoff stating she in fact did not receive said letter. Again, it is my opinion that San Mateo County Harbor District in fact failed in its imitation goal of marina tenants by documented harassment and the lies now wishes to grab more power in said new district license agreements. I can fully provide documentation of said harassment and lies upon request, but as of this date, harbor commissioners and San Mateo County Harbor District staff have completely ignored the situation and have not asked. I appreciate your consideration in this matter.
Okay. Next to the comment, commissioners, anyone wish to make any comments on the proposed license agreements?
They look good.
Okay, that was my comment as well, so.
I support it.
Okay. Right. So we'll see these again in final form next month. Okay. Great. Moving on to item number 12, adopt preliminary budget for 2023-24. Julie, this is yours.
Thank you, President Zemke, commissioners. Last meeting, I gave a pretty thorough presentation on the budget, so I'm going to keep it at a very high level today. And then if you have any follow-up questions, please let me know. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I think it's just easier to follow along if I show the public and everyone what we're looking at. So there's 2 key pages out of the budget document. The budget document itself is approximately 70 pages long, but the 2 key tables, the one table is on page 2 of 5 in your staff report, and it's also on page 20 of your budget document. The preliminary budget shows what we're projecting for the current year versus what we're projecting for next year. And so there's a comparison between those 2 items at the level that this Harbor Commission approves the budget. The operating revenues are expected to go down slightly due to projected decrease in the SAVE grant, which is offset by a projected inflationary increase in fees of 4.9%. The non-operating revenues are projected to go up 3.54%, That's because property tax is projected to go up 4.79%, and that's partially offset by lower estimated interest expense due to projected decrease in cash balances and the elimination of the COVID-19 grant of $77,000 that we're getting this year but won't be getting next year. Salaries, wages, and benefit expenditures are projected to increase by 20.12% due to an estimated salary, wage, and benefit cost increase, along with anticipation of being fully staffed in fiscal year 23-24. There are currently 2 vacancies that the district is in the process of filling now. And there were other vacancies and other leave of absences throughout this year. In addition, the workers' comp insurance costs are expected to increase by 1.2% due to claims being filed in calendar year 2022. The next line item is non-personnel expenditures. That's expected to go down very slightly. And there is anticipated increase of costs of approximately 5% due to inflation, which is offset by a decrease in the vessel destruction costs, which I described as part of the operating revenues. The vessel destruction costs, again, are expected to be higher in this current fiscal year because we're getting rid of a lot of derelict boats, and it is, as we go through that process, we don't expect it to be so costly next year. The 22-23, I still haven't received a invoice from the county, but the election costs are projected to be $745,000 this year. I'm not expecting it to be quite that high when we get the final invoice. Obviously, next year we will not have an election. Capital expenditures and associated capital contributions. I'm asking that the board adopt the budget as is, this preliminary budget, then we'll advertise the budget as is. But as we just discussed today, we're not going to be doing the Surfers Beach replenishment project this year. So there will be some dollars that are moving from the 22-23 projection to the 23-24 projection of about 2.6 to 3.6 million. Is that correct? Somewhere in that line. And so that adjustment will be made in the final budget, but I think that for the purposes of today's discussion, we can publish the preliminary budget for comment as is. Some of the capital projects that we will are expected to be finished as the Harbor Public Restroom at Surfers Beach. At least we went out to bid and we've funded that project. And retail center, the Pillar Point Harbor parking lot improvements, design and engineering for Pillar Point Harbor Johnson Pier and Docks reconfiguration, the Oyster Point Marina navigational aids replacement, design and engineering for Pillar Point Harbors, the design and engineering for the Pillar Point Harbor Surfers Beach and restoration and dredge project, design and engineering for Oyster Point Marina East Dock replacement, and the design and engineering for the Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center replacement. Couple projects expected to be funded in 23-24 is the design and engineering for the launch ramp at Pillar Point Harbor, construction for Surfers Beach restoration and dredge project. I guess what I just said before, please strike that because obviously I already thought about that one. Pillar Point Harbor habitat restoration, Oyster Point Marina access ramps for docks 1 through 6 and 11, the Oyster Point Marina East Side parking lot repair resurface, and the Pillar Point Harbor Rock slope restoration. The next major information is on page 45 of the budget document and on page 4 of the staff report. This is a 5-year projection. It takes the projection for 22-23, what we expect to finish off at June 30th, and then projects the next 5 years. And some of the assumptions that are built into this projection is that operating revenues will increase by 2.5% for each of the next 5 years. Non-operating revenues will decrease due to expected drop in interest income and decrease in property tax revenue of 1% due to recessionary concerns. Salaries, wages, and benefits are expected to increase by 5% per year, and non-personnel expenditures will increase by 2.5% per year. If you look down at the annual increase in working capital, it's under sources and uses where my pointer is $4.2 million for the end of 22-23. And then 23-24, it's 3.897 million. And then 24-25, 2.643 million, and so on and so forth. So throughout the next 5 years, if there isn't major changes to our budget and our assumptions that we're using in our 5-year projection, we do have a fully balanced budget where our revenues are exceeding our anticipated expenses, and that money is being used to increase the amount of working capital balances that we have to fund our capital projects. So with that, I'll just hand it back over to the commission, and if you have any questions or.
Okay, are there any public comments on this?
No problem.
Okay, any comments from the commission? Mr. Chancarelli.
Julie, I just want to thank you for this. I think it's really well done. And I'm ready to approve this preliminary budget with, slight modifications in the final.
I'll second that.
You're gonna make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve. Let me get the exact wording of the motion. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Right there.
To adopt resolution number 23-07, approving the preliminary budget fiscal year 2023-24 operating budget and the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
Yes.
Okay. Any further comment on that?
Please thank your team too.
Yes. Yes, no, I agree. This is very well thought out and very well put together. So I do appreciate somebody looking at all those figures and making sure they all that out.
Yeah.
So any final comments? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Chancarelli? Aye. Commissioner Slater-Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Palmer? President Zemke?
Yes.
Commissioner Tucci?
Aye.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Julie. The next item we're going to do is take item number 3, which we pulled off the agenda. And I think there was a recommendation that we maybe hold off on this till next meeting. Tom, you were.
President Zemke, if you could, staff would like to pull it and bring it back next month.
Oh, okay, that works fine.
Going into closed session. So we're going into closed session.
Okay, so at this time we will, should we retreat to your office, Jim?
Let's first take public comment on closed session before going into closed session. On both, I think, and you could take public comment on both of them before we leave.
Okay, at this time we will entertain public comment in both of the closed session items. The conference call, a conference with the real property negotiators and conference with legal counsel on existing litigation. Is there any public comment? Okay. We will retreat to Mr. Pruitt's office.
Recording stopped.
Oh, yes, shot with his Apple Watch. Just gave direction to staff on real property negotiators and received information on the existing litigation. Moving on to the next item on this, which is future agenda items. Oh, you want to?
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to extend the meeting to 5:15.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Slater Carter. Commissioner Donald.
Yes.
Commissioner Zemke.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chiangkrelli.
Aye.
Okay. We have a public comment on the, if somebody from the public who wishes to make a comment.
John Oldham.
For which item?
He's commenting on the coming back from closed session. I assume that's what he wants to talk about?
Just raised his hand.
Okay, we will give him the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for catching that. What I wanted to comment on was commissioners asking for agenda items. Was that appropriate now, or shall I wait till later?
It would be appropriate now.
Having meetings at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is horribly not conducive to public participation. How many people were here today? So there's a reason why these meetings happen in the middle of the day. It's because certain council or certain board members just don't want the public to participate. And that is just wrong. There is no reason for these meetings to be held at 12 and 1 o'clock. The only people that benefit from it are the people who want to get to the bar early. The rest of us don't. I'm at work. I have to take my breaks strategically so I can hopefully get a chance to participate. And that is the reason why you're having these meetings at this time of day. So I'm hoping one of the commissioners, just one of you, will put forth the notion that maybe we should hold your meetings when most meetings are held, which is in the evening. Mrs. Corrali's fire department, they hold it in the evening. All the coast, on the coast side, everybody holds it in the evening. The only people that hold their meetings during the day, and it makes sense, are the Coastal Commission and the county, because they have such a huge agenda. They can't possibly start at 7 in the evening. But you guys can. And there's a reason why you're not. And you know what that reason is. And it's not for our benefit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Future agenda items. Commissioner Staff. Yes.
I would like to see a discussion about having, working with Coastal towards a public works plan for the Harbor District based on our strategic plan. We have, and capital improvements so that we can try and get all of our Coastal Commission permits under one coastal umbrella. So we can, it may take a while, it'll cost some money, sorry. Beautifully balanced budget, but I think it will save us money in the long run, and it will save a lot of staff time and aggravation because we can just work on projects instead of having to redo this permitting process time and time again. And so I'd love to be able to have a longer discussion on it, not necessarily at the next meeting,
but at a future meeting.
But at some future meeting, I would love to be able to discuss it.
So if
That's a motion, I'll second that for a future agenda item, because I agree that something has to be under one umbrella so that we're looking at it at once and seeing where the whole, or what we're doing well at, or that kind of thing, what our needs are. I'm assuming that's what you're thinking could be
Oh, absolutely.
in this discussion, right?
Absolutely.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I think our procedures require a vote or at least a consensus on it. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we place on a future agenda item to be determined by the general manager who fits best in our future meetings.
That sounds good.
No, so it's not, if the next agenda looks really long, we defer it to another meeting. Okay.
Or another.
Okay. Can we get roll call, please?
Commissioner Donrock?
Aye.
President Zemke?
Aye.
Commissioner Tush?
Aye.
Commissioner Jane Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter?
Aye.
Okay. We will see that in future then. Any other items for the agenda? Future agendas? Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, is there a second?
Aye. Yes.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
President Zemke?
Aye.
Commissioner Tush?
Aye.
Commissioner Jane Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Donrock?
Aye.
Thank you all for your patience and time.
Thank you.
Hasta luego.
Thanks, everybody. Happy birthday, Tom.
Recording stop.